Let me start recording. Oh, when you tell us you can't, I'm not going to put this on. I just
No,
want
it's
to make
fine.
sure.
It's fine because the guy's kind of, I think he's dead anyway. Greg Theakston.
Yeah.
He had called me. It was something that he wanted. He called me up. I'm living in France. He called me at like 2:30 in the morning, and since nobody ever called, I answered the phone, and he goes, "Ah, this is Greg Theakston." And I said, Greg, do you realize what time it is here? He said, I said, it's like 2:30 in the morning. He goes, "Oh, then I'll keep it short." Yeah, that solves everything.
Oh, that's so funny. So we'll do intros real quick. Would you want that piece cut out or no? Is that can we keep that, or should we cut it up? Okay. Okay. Cool.
Because I mean, the guy anyway. He's just
super cool. So we're going to do quick intros and then just launch into things.
Cool.
All right. My name's Ed Piskor.
I'm Jim Rugg.
It's been a while since we did a shoot interview, so we got to do a big one, Jimmy, man. Geof Darrow is the man of the hour, tower of power. Too cold to hold, too sweet to be sour. drop some credits, man, and let's get this thing underway.
He enters my radar with Hard Boiled in the early 90s, and it was comics. I had never seen comics look like that before. Big guy, Rusty the Boy Robot, Shaolin Cowboy currently, and for the last maybe 15 years or so. Also known for working in the film industry on movies such as the Matrix movies, storyboards, concept art, Speed Racer, and before that, animation. So quite a career, and crossed paths with a lot of artists, creators, storytellers, comic book artists along the way. And hopefully we'll get into as much of that as we can here today.
We get deep, Uncle Geof, man. So let's talk for about an hour or two on you inking the Daredevil Child's Play cover. Nice for being here.
Marvel was not happy about.
No?
Oh, no, because they thought they were getting a Frank Miller cover. And at the time, when what Frank gave me was just kind of it wasn't really finished. It was on some kind of mylar tracing paper, and I said okay, and I started. I actually drew it then over his layout, and I think the kids pretty much kind of or what he drew, because I didn't want to change it too much, although I did. Then I added all the glass and the bullets and all that stuff. And before when I gave it to Frank, he goes, "Wow, you really turned it into your own thing." But I thought that's what he wanted, and they used it, but they didn't give me any credit, as I recall. They cropped it so that because I think Frank signed my name on it. It was FM, and then he put GD. Yeah, that was they weren't pleased. So
Geof, we'll probably jump around, time wise, but since we start with Frank Miller, I wonder, how did you guys first intersect? How did he find your work, or how did that come about?
Well, that was because actually it was through Jean-Jérôme Mobius. I mean, I was a big fan of his. I got Dark Knight, I Daredevil and all. I was a huge fan. But I was living in France when Dark Knight came out, and I just thought it was so fantastic. And I had went. Like I said, I was living in France. The summer I'd go back and I'd spend like a few months in California. I'd go to the San Diego convention and I'd see all my friends there, and then I'd get my dose of America, and then I'd go back to France. And Mobius had been moving. He was living in Santa Monica, and he working on this. He was trying to get an animated film off the ground called Internal Transfer, and he called me up and said, "Oh, Geof, Frank Miller is coming over today. Do you want to come?" And I said, "Yeah." And so he said, "Okay, be over here at like, I don't know what time it was, 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock." So I'm all excited, and I go over there, and I get there, and Jean's ex-wife is there, and I think his kids are there, and Frank Miller and Lynn Varley are there, but Mobius is nowhere to be found. And so I think I spent an hour with Frank and Lynn before he finally showed up, and then we just talked. But he didn't know who I was or what I did, and I didn't really, I've never been one to sort of like, "Hey, look at what I'm doing," because I always think, they're gonna. I don't want to bore people, and I don't want to be one of those guys like, "Oh God, here he comes." So, I had his address, and I sent him some of my. I sent him the City of Fire thing that I did with Mobius, and I sent him my first book, which had been printed in France. And yeah, I didn't really hear anything, and understandably. I don't know, one night once you get somebody, it was like, I don't know, like 11 o'clock in the evening or maybe later, I get a phone call. And it's Frank calling me from California, just telling me, oh, geez, I didn't know you drew comics and da. And we started communicating back and forth. And when I finally moved back to Los Angeles, we stayed in contact, and I would meet up with him, and we'd go to movies, we'd go out to eat, and sometimes with Lynn, and it was just one day we were downtown near Little Tokyo, around about 8th Street, because he lived down there in a loft on Traction Avenue, which was like at night. It was like being a Night of the Living Dead, because there were shooting galleries all over the place. And you'd have, you'd see some pretty ugly stuff. But, we were standing in the corner, and he said, hey, would you ever like work from somebody else's story? And I said, well, yeah, sure. He goes, well, with me? I go, yeah. He said, what do you want to do? And I said, something with lots of action. And so it wasn't the first thing. Hard Boiled was not the first thing he came up with. The first thing we almost did was he'd spoken with, he was close friends with Steve Gerber, and they were talking about doing kind of a revisionist version of Superman, but not called Superman. It was going to be kind of what they thought Superman would be, which I was like, wow, that'd be cool. It's kind of Superman. But it never could quite, Frank couldn't gel it with Steve. And then it was going to be a Daredevil story. And it was, I can't remember which one it was. It was one actually, John Romita Jr. actually drew it. But Frank at one point, he just said, hey, you've never done work for hire, and I don't want to be the guy to pull you into that world. And I said, okay, so we'll come up with something else. And he just handed me, in fact, I got it right here. I brought a little prop. There it is, the original script for Hard Boiled, which.
Jeff, when we first connected, you were writing some wrongs as per some of the videos that we recorded with Hard Boiled and Big Eye Rusty the Boy Robot. So one thing I would like to get, what's that?
And Sin City.
Yes.
I am Kevin.
Yes, it's not Mignola. See, we grew up with Wizard magazine. Wizard told us that it was Mignola, and we just perpetrated a fraud. And
there was a likeness, because we both had glasses, and although I'm Mike and I standing next to each other. I'm a bit taller than Mike, and yeah, that was me. Yeah.
Did anybody ever come across that Marv toy with the severed Kevin head?
My dad had it. He thought that was the funniest thing. He had it in his office, his room. And he goes, oh, he just thought that was hilarious. I was like, well, I don't know, Dad, because it really, when Frank had called me up and said, hey, can you send me some pictures of yourself? I said, what for? He goes, I'm going to put you, I go, okay, but he didn't tell me what it was going to be. So when I found out, I go, God, you got me this cannibalistic, I think, pedophile. And then I get my arms and legs cut off. And I was like, oh, man, Frank, he thought that was so funny. I go, oh, man. He also put me in RoboCop. RoboCop 2, there's when they're looking, if you watch really close, they're on the screen. They're trying to find, if you remember the movie, another RoboCop. So they're trying to find someone whose brain or body they could use to become the RoboCop 0.2 or whatever the hell. And so they're scrolling through names, and one of them, I can't remember who the other was. There were a couple of comic artists, and then there's me. They got my name, Jeff Darrow, but the photo they show is like an old lady. It was kind of funny.
Probably the most egregious part of that whole thing is that freaking Free Willy Elijah Wood, Frodo Baggins played you in the flick, man. What do you think about that shit?
Well, it was supposed to, because Frank had asked me earlier, they were talking about doing it, and he asked me to play myself. And I said, yeah, I'd do that, well, sure. And then when they finally cast the thing, they got Mickey Rourke, and I'm 6'6", and Marv is supposed to be really big. And so he said, you'd tower over Mickey Rourke. So they got And I actually ran into Elijah Wood at a film festival. He said, "Hey, you played me in a movie." Like I said, look on his face, you get that glazed look, like, who is this guy? But yeah. But I
Geof,
always, Frank gave him that Charlie Brown shirt. That was really funny.
so what was the division of labor with Hard Boiled and Big Guy Rusty the Boy Robot? More specifically, what did those Frank Miller scripts look like, and what were your contributions?
Well, it's kind of, I mean, Frank was really patient because I changed him. I didn't know I was, I just thought, well, if I had a kind of a good idea to sort of enhance things, I would, and I was so intimidated by him that I didn't want him to see anything. So I don't know how many pages I was into it before I showed it to him. Because I thought if I show it to him, he'll just like, well, it was a good idea at the time, but because he was actually paying me, because he didn't want to do it for any of the big two. And so he said, I'll pay you, I can't remember what it was, a month to, you just draw the comic. I'm not the fastest guy in the world. And after about a month, I'd only done a few pages. And I think he thought I was going to turn out like, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 pages a month. And that's just, I could, and they look like shit. But so that's why we eventually went to Dark Horse. But, I could read you the script for Big Guy.
You should really do that, because you sent me a little JPEG of that, and it's fantastic. It adds a lot of illumination.
But I mean, like, just for instance, for the actual first page of Hard Boiled was because he added stuff. He changed the beginning, because the very actual first page of Hard Boiled was supposed to be just Nixon standing there with with all shot up and the bullet holes and all the graffiti behind him, and then he said, well, in the next panel you got this car. There's two bodies lying at his feet, and there's a car coming down the alley on the next panel. And I did this. I added. I can't find it. I thought, well, a couple guys. It's not that, And so I did that scene that you see in the page 2 and 3. That, or I don't know what they are now, but it's a double page spread of that car with a machine gun coming out of the wheel wells, and I drew all those dead people all over the place. And then car's supposed to crash into him, and then I do that whole thing where it crashes in, and there's a weird sort of I thought it was a marathon sex chainsaw party where he had all the elite were watching. It was sort of a snuff film live, I thought, because he's supposed to be there to collecting. They owe back due taxes, and I thought, let's show how horrible these people really are. And so I thought that that was like when Frank was like, oh my God, what's he doing? And he told me later, he was like pacing around like, I don't know what to do. He's doing this. He's but he was really, really, really patient. And
I think a lot of magic comes out of that kind of a collaboration. And, another example with Miller would be Elektra Assassin. And I've read in interviews about that where, he talks about just ripping up the script and rewriting it once he saw the pages.
Yeah, that's what he told me too. Yeah.
It seems like maybe with your art, it was a similar effect where, like, once he saw it, it was like, I got something else here.
Oh yeah, and he was supposed to be human. He was not supposed to be a cyborg, but he couldn't wrap his head around all that, that stuff that I did to him, because I'd been watching I'd seen some of those John Woo movies, and I really like his stuff, and I like it. And when I was a kid growing up, there's like film language where if you got shot, in the heart or in the stomach, you're a dead guy. But in Hong Kong movies, unless your head's cut off, you're not going to die. And so that was my take on, as long as the head's still attached to the body, you can keep going. And so I thought it'd be so funny to have him so shot up and impossible for him to survive, and yet, he'd walk away from things just like they do in those Better Tomorrow movies. But Frank is like really, so he changed it to make him a cyborg, so that they could kind of explain it. But well, I'll read it. I do have I found the big guy script. This is it. It's one page.
It's amazing.
It says Tokyo, Japan. The front of a genetic research lab shudders and explodes. A giant dinosaur, the result of an experiment gone awry, tears from the lab on a rampage, steps on people, charges through buildings. Police are crushed. Monster bats away helicopters, and so on. Frantic troops send a distress call. The Persian Gulf. Orders are shouted. Soldiers run across the deck of an enormous aircraft carrier. Something is launched. It streaks skyward. Carrier commander salutes it. It is America's secret weapon, Merv. He wanted to call him Merv. I said, that's too close to Marv. So anyway, Tokyo. Monster continued its carnage until an ear-splitting shriek gets its attention and brings people to their knees in pain. A missile? No, it's Merv. Merv battles the monster, shows off his weapons. The battle levels Tokyo. Then Merv gets serious. He fires a tactical nuclear missile down the monster's throat, grabs it by the tail, swings it, leveling more buildings, heaves it far into the ocean. Boom, the nuke goes off. The Emperor's palace. Merv is honored in a ceremony, given a medal. Military officers give him Rusty, which actually was added later. Merv is annoyed, but has to take his adorable little robot sidekick along to avoid a diplomatic incident. Merv receives orders to through his headgear and blasts off, leaving a crater and many more dead. Rusty keeps pace, determined to be Merv's pal. But yeah, because I mean, Rusty was my idea because I thought if he invaded, because the Japanese, very nationalistic, and if the Americans just decided to send something over there to help them without, they would first try to take it out themselves, and their line of defense would be their superhero, which I thought that was like Astro Boy seems to be their name. So what if we had this little robot guy and he was supposed to get destroyed, but Frank thought, oh, that's great. We'll just have him, every time he shows up, we'll have Rusty be destroyed, which was pretty funny.
Super illuminating when you sent that script piece off, because in our conversation, we were definitely wondering, like what that process was. And certainly in our own conversations, Japan comes up a lot, right, Geoff?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I wonder, like, first time you went over there, you're a devotee of this stuff. You watch the baby cart flicks, baby cart assassins, all that. I thought I was a big Willie when I went over there and filled up 4 suitcases, man. So first time you went to Japan, what kind of stuff were you looking at? What did you bring back? How much?
Oh man, because I had been working at Hanna-Barbera, and I was saving my money up to go over there. And because I was just, I was crazy about Japanese, the samurai films and anything Japanese. And because I had like Lone Wolf and Cub, I'd seen the original was the Swords of Violence, I think was the first one that actually got translated in America. It was before Shogun Assassin. And I had a book by Alan Silver called Samurai Films, and they had all of them in there. And Zatoichi, and they listed them all by year and which films had come out. And so I'm going to go over there. I'm going to find Japanese movie posters. I'm going to get comic books, because there was a guy called Mizuki Mikiyaka who did a thing called Wild 7, which I happened to I'd go into when I worked in advertising, and occasionally I'd be sent to like a big city, and I'd look in the yellow pages to see if there was like a foreign bookstore. I'd look for French bookstores, and I'd look for Japanese bookstores. And I'd just go in there and just pull things off the shelf. And I found this guy, Wild 7, which I thought the storytelling is so fantastic. I don't know what's going on, but I kind of could because it was so well, they were like movies. And so I found that. And then I found a early Kojima, before he did Lone Wolf and Cub, he'd do samurai stories, and I got some of those. And so I was, I wanted to go over there, and I'd seen La Casa Cagliostro, which the Miyazaki film, which I thought was, was so fantastic. And I found out it was based on a comic, Monkey Punch. I had to get those. So I went over there, and at that time, I don't know what airport you landed in, but that time I landed in Haneda, which is really close to Tokyo. And and there was no baggage limit at that time either. Right. And there was what I can't think of the name. What is the book section? The part of town, Jimbocho. Near Jim
Oh
Belushi.
yeah. Where Shueisha and
Yeah. And
Sean became.
I was staying in the YMCA, and later on I moved to like a youth hostel. But I'd go out during the day, and I couldn't. I'd study a little Japanese so that I could ask for things. But the thing, I don't know if you found this, but if you go into the subway, there's so many exits. It's not like in Chicago where there's one exit. It's like you could come out one area and then go back in a different one. You think you're in a whole different place. And I would get lost all the time. And I ended up having to take a cab. I always kept my address written in kanji on a piece of paper to give the cab driver to get home. But I went in there and I found one bookstore that sold nothing but manga. But if you went in there after 3:00, the kids would get out of school and they'd all be in there. And it's just jam full of kids reading manga. And they would let them. Now they're sealed in plastic. But back then, they're just on the shelf. So these kids are in there. And like, I couldn't move around. There was this goofy guy, like, this crazy gaijin guy in there. And so I'd get there as soon as it would open and I'd buy stuff. And so I don't know. And I was there for 2 months. So I had to kind of pace myself because I can't drag this shit around because I went to Kyoto and Himeji and Osaka and I was buying toys and these replica pistols that they would make, these model kits. But God, I don't know how many tons I had, but I had like the whole Monkey Punch series, which was, I don't know, like 30 of them. That Wild 7 thing, that was another 30 of those, a 30 of Monkey Punch, and then any just odd stuff that I could find. But I never did find any movie posters because I didn't know anybody there. And that stuff is kind of a niche kind of thing, and you had to know somebody to kind of know where to go. I don't think there was anything like Nakano Broadway because that was long before even Akihabara. It was like, I think it was like 83 or 84. And I swear to God, there's more photos of me in Japan than probably anywhere in the world because people would just want to pose with me.
I got that stuff too, man. They would just run up and go like, "Oh, gaijin," and start taking photos.
You get business guys would come to you and go, "Oh, may I practice English with you?" Yeah, sure. How are you? Where are you from? It is nice weather. And they're just walking there and be it. That was their whole. They would walk away. And yeah, but kids, I remember being in the zoo. I went to the zoo, and little kids were running up to me and sticking their hand out and giving me candy. It was like one of the exhibits escape. But oh man, yeah, it was funny. And I'd go into the temples, and you have to take your shoes off, and they give you these little slippers to wear, and they were like, man, I got size 13 feet, and they'd cover half my feet, so I'm kind of walking and when I come back, and you'd put your shoes in, like they give you these little cubby holes, and I come back and my shoes would be sticking out of the cubby hole, and there'd be people gathered around my shoes, and they'd say, "Oh, what is your shoe size?" It was like a Monty Python sketch. I go, well,
it's a great story. One of the things I was curious about is how manga and anime got into your influences. So, that answers some of those questions. I assumed that it might have been something that was being traded around the animation industry in LA.
Oh, no, they looked down on that stuff. I mean, when I was in Hanna-Barbera, there was that weird, the guys at Disney, they were the animators, and we were kind of like, because I mean, granted, Disney was doing really quality stuff, and Hanna-Barbera was just cranking it out. And had that, God, that was such a weird thing. The guys that did in between animation, they had to do so many feet a week, and if they went past it, they got bonus feet, and they would make a lot of money. And a lot of these guys that I would run across they were doing in betweens, couldn't really draw, but they knew how to like go with the arm from here to there. Because I mean, there was always kind of a profile. It was never really anything. You never have anything like this going on in Hanna-Barbera. It would be all pretty simple. And but yeah, and the Disney guys who were so they would freelance because they would take footage from Hanna-Barbera, and they made really good money because at the time, part of your pay when you're at Disney was working for Disney. The cachet of saying, "Well, I work at Disney Animation," and look down on Filmation and Hanna-Barbera. And I mean, granted, they were just there for the money.
Geof, what would you do at Hanna-Barbera? What was your job or whatever?
I was in the model department because I had actually went there because they used to have because I had been at Filmation for about 2 weeks working under another artist named Will Minio, and they were going to have me do storyboards because they really liked my portfolio, but it didn't work out because Filmation at the time, they most of their stuff, if you watch some of their older cartoons, maybe even He-Man, they really relied on stock animation. They did a couple really well animated things of like a character running, and they'd use that stuff as much as possible. And so you'd have this book that was like this thick of stock stuff. And so as you're storyboarding, oh, I can use. So you have to, but then we had 2 weeks to familiarize ourselves with those books. And after like 2 weeks, as I was sitting right near the office, all of a sudden they started calling guys into the office, and it was like this big bloodletting. They just let us all go, and I was the last guy they pulled in, and so I was pretty desperate because I needed money, and I'd heard that at Barbera they had like you could get into a free in-between class. They would let you do it if you learned to be in betweens, you could get a job at Hanna-Barbera, and it was either that or I almost went to work as a security guard or working in a porn bookstore. And well, not that low yet, but because well, that's another story. But so the guy that ran the department, and this is no lie, is this older guy, and he looked at my portfolio, and I had some spaceships and stuff because I was drawing science fiction. And at that time, I think Star Wars was popular, and I think Empire Strikes Back had come out, and everything that Hanna-Barbera sold was they did a new Space Ghost, they did a show called Astro and the Space Hounds, they're doing Herculoids, so they need somebody who could do spaceships. And they saw that ideas, I mean, did you do these yourself? And I said, yeah. So they sent me up to show them to this guy, Bob Singer, who ran the model department, and he hired me. And but there's only the reason I talk about the other guy because his actual name was Harry Love, and that was his real name, Harry Love. And I went to his class a couple times for in between because they have that, oh, they're going to fire me eventually. This guy was he was hitting on the girls, and he would pull out his wallet and he'd take out this picture and say, see this? I was in a car accident, and this is the way I really look. I don't, this face has all been redone. So when you look at me, you should think of this picture. And I'm like, oh my God. So anyway, but thanks to Harry Love, I did get into the Hanna-Barbera doing model designs, but I was horrible at it. I was really bad. My boss hated me, and because it is really hard doing animation because you have to do turns and you have to think in 3 dimensions, and that's why, you know, like I mentioned, we talked Ed and Jim that there were a lot of comic book artists there, like Jack Kirby. And there was Jesse Santos and Alex Nino, Alfredo Cala, a lot of Philippine artists, Carmen Infantino. But it's, you do one drawing is fine, but if you have to turn it, sometimes, you know, it's, so I was having quite a struggle, but I was good at doing cars and stuff. So I would draw cars and props. I did the drawing that saved my career there was, I had to draw a hat, a sombrero on Scooby-Doo. And this woman that everybody loved that was working there, her name was Sandra Beret. Her mother was Anita Page, 30s film star. And this woman was beautiful, and Sandra. And all the heads of the department were just crazy about her. And so she needed an assistant, and she saw that, do you like doing this stuff again? It's fine. She goes, she didn't like doing it, and she could really draw really well. So I'd do all the stuff she didn't want to do. And those same drawings, if I took it to my boss to show them to him, he go, oh boy, that's really not very good. Did you go to school? I said, yeah. Well, you got a lot to learn. And every day I just felt horrible because he was, but if I gave my drawings to her and she took them in, they passed because they were all just crazy about her. And she was a really good artist. And so that's what I would do. And eventually I moved up a little bit. I worked on Richie Rich, and I worked on Super Friends, and I would do monsters. And I didn't do too many of the characters because I could never wrap my head around some of that stylistic Hanna-Barbera stuff.
Wouldn't it be guys like Alex Toth would do a lot of those Super Friends designs? Do you have a Toth story that you could give the Kayfabe audience?
Yeah. I only had, because he was so notorious for being kind of, this love-hate relationship with them. And they noticed that these Japanese robot shows were popular. They were like, and so Hanna-Barbera was going to do one. And someone had told them, well, this guy, because I collected those things. Oh, there's this guy in the model department. He knows all about these. And they said, well, they had me come in and bring my die-cast giant robot toys and to demonstrate to the other artists how they worked. And Alex Toth was one of them. And because they were going to have him do some design work, and because you do an illustration to pitch it to the network. And generally around, I don't know if it was May or something like April and May, they would do these big full color boards. A lot of times it was Toth, or it was sometimes Jack Kirby, Doug Wildey, Dave Stevens, and they would take these things in and pitch them to the network, almost like, I don't know, they used to, I don't know if you ever saw Bewitched, but they used to do that on there. Darren Stevens would bring in these advertising campaigns with these cartoons on them, and it was just like that. And they would send them, and the studio would say yes or no, and then have, I guess, a bit of a Bible with it, but generally just would look at the drawings and they go, yeah, yes or no. So anyway, so we're supposed to be, I'm working on this thing called, it was going to call Totem Man, and it was like a totem pole that's actually a robot. And it was like, the 5 pieces break down and form this totem pole, which would like fall down and roll on wheels. It was so stupid. It's like, did they even watch these Japanese cartoons? Because it's like, no, they sprout arms and they're fighting. That's what the kids want to see. But they had Alex working on there, and so I'm showing him this stuff. And at the end of the meeting, he kind of looked at me and goes, "Hey, they tell me you know Mobius." And I said, "Yeah." "You worked on Tron, right?" And I said, "Yeah." "Well, what did he get paid?" And I said, I think he told me something like more than $1,000 a day. Oh, and he stormed off, and that was my.
Was he doing some Disney piece that he didn't get paid well for, or?
No, well, he would. I don't know what it was, because I think he was notorious because there was a guy that I worked with too there named Mel Kiefer, and he told me that, have you ever seen How to Murder Your Wife, the Vernon Lisi film with Jack Lemmon?
Right.
Well, it's about a cartoonist, and I saw that as a kid. And if you watch that movie, I always thought it was kind of based on Alex Raymond, because I mean, if in those days, like, if you were a cartoonist, according to this film, you had, you're like a playboy. You were like James Bond with a pencil, and you go around take photographs of all these things, and he had his character, and they had someone to do the comic strips, and they had hired Alex Toth, and he did a few of them, and then he would do this. He said, "You're not paying me enough," and so, well, that's what you agreed to. I said, "Well, it's not enough." I go, "Well," so they fired him, and they would bring in this guy Mel Kiefer, and he did the ones in the film. And 2 or 3 times he got a job that way. It was Alex would start a film, and he would then, "I'm not getting paid enough," and they go, "Well, and then he would just walk off. I mean, there's lots of stories of him. I don't know how true they are. Just like, there's that classic where they said they like tore up the whole artwork and mailed it back to the editor. I don't know if it was DC or Marvel, but he was. I never was friends with him, but I've heard stories that people who were friends with him. Well, actually, this is a story. A friend of mine, he was selling his artwork through the Buyer's Guide, which was like the only comic paper at the time. And he had an ad. There's a beautiful handwritten, this lettering, hand lettered. And he was selling his artwork. So a friend of mine had some money, and he sent him some money to buy a page, Alex Toth page. And Alex sent him back a page, and it was a page from that story Pi, if you've ever seen it, beautiful, about an alien and a little boy. And it wasn't the one he asked for, because the one he wanted had been sold, but it was one of those much more expensive. But Alex said, "Well, I'll send you this because you sent me the money," and da-da-da-da. And my friend was really happy. So he said, "I'm going to order another." So I ordered another one from Alex, and he gets this letter back from him with this check tore up. And Alex saying, "I thought you were just some poor kid, but I realized you got money. I feel like you ripped me off." I mean, that was anyway.
Yeah, I shouldn't laugh. It's kind of a sad story. It feels like everyone who knew Alex Toth has this kind of a story where something caused a rift.
Yes, you'd say something wrong, and you're really friends with him. And I think Mike Allred stayed. I don't know. I think he stayed friends with him to the end. But yeah, it was because he was a guy. I don't think I've ever been really disappointed in any of because when I went Mobius, I was like, "What's he going to be like? What if he's a jerk and he's like my idol?" And like, because I'd already met Jack Kirby, and he's like the sweetest guy, one of the sweetest guys you'd ever want to meet. And funny enough, Walt Simonson's like the same. He's another just amazing, sweet, wonderful guy. And but Jean he was just, he's like, he's, yeah, just a nice guy.
How'd you connect with him, Mobius?
Because I did have friends that worked at Disney, and word came down that he was on the lot working on Tron. And I was like, holy cow. And I had my girlfriend at the time, her friend was an engineer, and he was one of the guys building Epcot Center in Florida. So he's on the Disney lot. I said, this guy's got juice, because I mean, he's like head of this big project. I bet I can, if I ask him, he can get me into I just wanted to meet him, because I was just so. And so I called my friend and said, how can you find this? He didn't know who he was. What's his name again? Jean Giraud. Okay, 2 days go by, and I get a call like on a Friday, and he says, yep, we're having dinner with him on Saturday night. And I gave him your address, and I was like, holy shit. And I still couldn't believe, what if there's like another genre? It's not the right genre, bro. And I remember sitting there watching, and I see him come out of the darkness, because I'm sitting on my doorstep waiting to see, and there he was, and it was him. And we had dinner, and we just kind of hit it off. And I oddly enough, he was in my house and my apartment, and when he left, he had one of those kind of like I guess what they call, it's called fanny packs, or no, not fanny pack. It was like a man purse kind of thing, and he had forgotten it in my apartment. And I had a number, and I called up to let him know, that he left it. And I remember having that thinking, God, what's in that bag? I wonder what's in there. Maybe there's a sketchbook. I go, no. I can't do that with the file. And I didn't. And he came and we got together again. And once again, I never told him what I did. And he asked me, what do you do? And I said, and so he wanted to see what I did. And I was actually trying to figure out, because at Hanna-Barbera, and I was so bad at perspective. I'm trying to figure out how perspective works. And I was drawing like spaceships in perspective, but they were so crude, and they were very blocky, because I hadn't figured out how curves and ellipses and all that stuff worked. And so he thought I was doing computer graphics. And, I should show these to Steve Lisberger, who was the director, and maybe get you some work. And I was like, but I never did. But then we stayed in contact. I told him I drew comics, and I said if I ever came to France, that I could go and meet him. And so I'm in my first big trip. I went to lived in Romorantin, which was in south of France, and I went and stayed with him a couple of days. And I said, I had a comic book story that I drew, and he really liked it. And he took me. We went together. I went to Paris, and he met me there, and he introduced me to his editor at Metal Hurlant, which is, the original heavy metal. And they liked it, and they bought it. Except it was like 4 pages, but there must have been 20 panels on each page, because they were huge, huge originals. And originally got cut up and printed it into like a 10-page story or 10 or 12-page story. But
what were comics like that you were making back then, Geof? Were you doing that sort of like in between animation jobs? And were you talking to other guys like Dave Stevens and the other guys who we know that made comics in that animation area?
Yeah. I mean, I didn't want to work in animation, but I thought I could make some money, and I put it away. And in the evening, if I had any energy left, I would work on them. But like I said, my boss hated me so much. It was really hard for me, because I just felt awful about myself all the time. I just dreaded. But since I wasn't very good, I would get laid off first, and then I'd have unemployment for 6 months, and then I'd work on my comics, because I made enough money off unemployment to work on these things. But I didn't have that many comic book friends. I had met Dave, because when I mentioned before I started at Filmation, he was there, and they took me around to go, oh, you got to meet this guy. His name is Dave Stevens. He draws comics. I remember going over there, and Dave was working on, they were doing Flash Gordon, and I still remember this drawing. It was a drawing of like a dragon's foot, the little dragon flying around it. And Dave has got his pencil, and he's like feathering the pencil lines in it. And I remember them later telling me he was doing layouts, and they said, we get like 1 or 2 layouts out of him a week, but they're really beautiful. I mean, Dave is just the stories I can tell you about him. But because Dave was looking for an assistant because he was going to ghost on Star Wars, the strip for Russ Manning. So he's looking for someone to help him, like maybe do some of the mechanical stuff. And so he wanted to see my artwork, and I remember showing it to him. And his assessment, I always remember, because I remind him of this, is like he looked at it, and I had this guy spin a control panel in the spaceship. He goes, maybe you should design stereo equipment. That was his assessment of my comic book skills. But yeah, so him, and he had a studio, then later the studio that he shared with, originally Paul Chadwick was there, but he had left. But there was Bill Stout, and that's how I met Bill Stout. And I'd go over there and see Dave, and he was working on, he showed me the storyboards he was working on for Raiders of the Lost Ark. And there was stuff like at that point, that villain that gets his, the guy with the sunglasses, the really horrible, who melts, I think, at the end. He had an arm that was like a machine gun. Like, I thought that was fantastic. He had this clip in the side of it, and they thought that was too. I guess George Lucas thought that was too fantastic, so that got cut out. But in fact, the thing that Dave did for Raiders, I don't think they used it. They used it. It's the beginning of the second one in the Chinese restaurant in Hong Kong, the nightclub. But I'd go over there and look at his stuff, and he was so good. And he was starting. He hadn't done the Rocketeer yet. He was doing covers and just trying to do different things. But that's how we got to know each other. We actually got closer because he'd come and visit me in Paris, and we'd go out to places with him and some French artists. And he was such a character. We're so diametrically opposed. I remember showing him, when I showed him Shaolin Cowboy, he was like, "Are you sure you can put that much action? Is that a good idea?" I go, "Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I always thought there wasn't enough action in the Rocketeer," which I always found incredibly autobiographical. I thought that was his story. That whole, the girlfriend that's posing for pictures, and he's unaware of it, and he had some things like that in his life. And so I always saw, because the Rocketeer was him. It looked just like him.
Speaking of stuff that didn't make the final cut and film work, all this and that, man, like I heard there's like a John Wick poster that we're never going to be able to see for some sort of violent content or something, man. Is that fake or
No, it's real. It's real. I mean, they called me. They tried to get me to do it for the first film, and for some reason, I didn't do it. I don't know what it was, but then they called me for the second one, and I was actually going to be moving back here, and was living in Chicago, and it seemed like, I think it was like maybe the 20th anniversary. There was some kind of anniversary that tied into the Matrix. And I thought, it'd be nice to do something with Keanu because he's such a nice guy. And I said, yeah, I'll do it. And I said, well, I always ask what the parameters are. So that I said, what can I do? Obviously you can have like sex, but you know how that is in Hollywood. You can't show a breast, but you can show like a guy, being, disemboweled. I mean, they could make a film of a Red Room and they'd get away with it. But if you had some overtly sexual content, they would probably, whether it be exercised or completely, they'd say no. But so I did this thing, and it was like a triptych. It was like they could cut it up into 3 pieces. And I sent them the pencil. Oh, they loved it. Da, 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 and then I got it colored. Da, 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 da. And then they said they didn't hear anything from them. And I said, so are we gonna? And it's getting closer and closer to the film coming out. And I said, what's going on? And they said, well, we can't use it because it's too violent. We're afraid it'll affect the film's release. And I was like, come on, it's pretty hypocritical. I mean, come on, it's John Wick. It's not Gumby. They're not going to be shocked. Because I mean, I said, well, I wanted to like, can I show it to be? No, you can't even show it to anybody.
See, that's where the mythology comes from, right? Like because it's so crazy that it can't even be shown. But obviously, like, you know, they paid you, it's their property or whatever. But like, is there something in there that like is particularly crazy? Like,
no, if I'd have thought, I'd have brought it. I mean, I don't think they'd care now how much I'd get sued. Maybe I'll send it to you and you can judge for yourself.
I'd like to see it.
Yeah, I would
You
too.
know,
I would love that.
I wouldn't show it off. I would just check it out for sure.
I'll find it. I'll send you. It's you know, like there's a like there's one long shot of just him, just kind of aftermath thing, kind of like hardboiled, where there's like dead people everywhere and the car accidents. I mean, just all sorts of, and it's nothing to do with the film because I didn't see the film, and they gave me kind of a rough, you know, idea what it was. I go, I'm just gonna draw something because I didn't want to look like, sometimes you see those posters and they're just like they've given him 7 stills and that's what the poster is. This thing has absolutely nothing that's in the film. And like one where he's like killing this guy, blowing this guy's face off while he's cutting his throat with a pair of scissors, and you know, but so it never, you know, never saw the light of day. But I'll send it to you. You can see. It's pretty violent. Yeah. But I mean, I held myself back. I mean, there's stuff that I was going to do. It's like, you know, like even with for Ed, your cover, that was terrifying for me to do because I mean, there was like this one thing I was going to draw for your cover. I thought it was really, I thought it was really disturbing. I thought, I don't know.
What was it, man? It was dick trauma or something like that.
Oh no! To me, it was horrible. I do this drawing of these 2 little girls with blindfolds, and they're sitting at a table, and you've got like the little dolls with them, like having a deep tea party, and there's other chairs, and there's these disemboweled people sitting at them having tea, but they're just, and all sorts of just horrible things have happened to them, like you saw me draw, but even worse. And it just like, you know, entrails strung like birthday party confetti and just things like that. And I thought, yeah, it might be a little too rude. But yeah.
You know, it was super cool seeing that piece materialize, you know, in its process stages. One of the things I was wondering, and you brought up perspective earlier, do you lightly grid off your entire image?
Yeah, I do. Some of it I don't have to do as much anymore, but yeah, I do. I don't grid it so much. That's why I would just like, I'd figure out what my vanishing point is, and I wouldn't grid it. I go, well, like if it's buildings, I figure out, if it's a long shot and it's buildings, I figure out what those shapes are, and I'll just draw them out like as just a box, so they know that that's the box. And for instance, if there's people on a street, you draw a doorway, and I've shown my daughter this. That doorway will give you this size of proportion, because you have to be able to fit into that door. Even windows. I was in comics. I always see that. Even Jack Kirby used to do it. He'd have like the Captain America like on top of a building, and below him would be like windows that were about this. They were like this, and the guys are this big. So, but it didn't matter because I mean you'd see it, and it worked. But you know, I see guys like they'll come into they're standing inside of, they'll draw a room, and they don't think of the proportion, and the door behind him is so small they'd have to bend over in half to get in the room.
I often think that's like a young cartoonist. It's a sign of a young cartoonist. It feels like we all learn perspective after we've started running. You know, we want to make these comic books, but there are a lot of missing tools in terms of drawing.
God, I remember in school and they had perspective. I was like, why do I want to know? Why do I need to know this? I think I know enough about it, but I didn't know anything. And that was one thing like I learned at Hanna-Barbera was that. And then from looking at Mobius, a lot of it, because the Europeans, they know it inside and out. Or God, you look at it and you're like, Otomo, those guys, my God, you know, they really know. But I've never like drawn like a grid and then started drawing in it. I just, like I say, figure out that my point of view, the couple vanishing points, and I always I'll draw the one figure and then I build around it. And I mean, you make a lot of errors in perspective, because I remember when I've got one drawing, I don't have it here, but where I thought, well, I drew my vanishing point in the picture area, but in an odd space so that it would be impossible because I was following the vanishing points, but so you'd have a figure that'd be this big, and then next to it there'd be someone like this big, because I put my vanishing point right there. And it's just those rookie mistakes that you make. And
Mobius would do that often, though. Like one of my favorite things to see cartoonists do, and he would do it often, where they would be essentially standing on the horizon line. So the vanishing point is the soles of the feet, and you get that phenomenon. You could draw the biggest shoe, and that's like some foreground character. Then you could draw anybody as long as they're standing on that point.
Yeah. And
it's technically accurate.
Oh, and it's so fun to do. I mean, there's that. I think it's one of my, just like, I don't know if you have key drawings that you think of that but one of them that are informative. But for me, it's The Long Tomorrow, and it's one where he's like walking into this. It's like that. He's walking down the street, and he's like walking on the horizon line, or the floor, which is kind of below him. But I'm not going to make any sense. But the idea that the figures are below that. Because if you draw your perspective line down, they're like below they're almost like they're disappearing into the ground, but that's what perspective is. I had one of the last crazy conversations I ever had was with Dave Stevens, he was doing a cover for Tom Jane had this comic. I can't think of the name of it, but he had done a cover and he was having trouble with the perspective, and he called me up and wanted me to help him walk him through it. And it was hard because, we're doing it. I'm on the phone because I didn't have Zoom at the time, and I'm looking at his drawing on my computer, and I'm going, well, it depends where you see your vanishing point. He just kind of eyeballed it, and it worked. But I said, Dave, if you want to do this like accurate perspective thing, you're going to have to change this completely, because you've done this and you've done that. And I said, perspective, it just has to look right. Even if it's not right, as long as it looks right. I mean, if it looks off, then people are it's going to be obvious. But if you do what I tell you to do, this is not going to be the same drawing, because I draw things, I think, in kind of perspective, and I don't really mess with the rules too much, I don't think. Probably.
So I imagine that, given the level of detail in your illustrations, that the paper you draw on fairly big. I've never seen many of your originals, so I'm imagining the paper's pretty big. So do you have to send this vanishing point way off the?
Yeah, I'll this to show to you.
I'm imagining like a yardstick to like find this vanishing point on a giant ass piece of paper.
Well, there is your cover. Can you see it?
Yes. Yeah, we just don't want to talk, because when we talk, the camera goes on us. So we were checking that out. Can you show it to us again?
Yeah. That's the pencil drawing.
That's amazing.
But I always erase my perspective lines, because I was like, I don't know. There's the ink drawing. Because I don't know. It's like, I'm giving away the magic. Like, those artist edition books.
Love them.
I love them too. But I don't think my ink, because I don't know. There's nothing on the finished thing. You can't. There's no blue line. There's no all that kind of stuff that I like to see myself. There's none of it there.
So that was a big ass piece of paper, Geof.
Yeah, but they're smaller. That one in general. But like here's like. This is my new comic story, but can you see it? But when I did Hard Boiled, for instance, every panel was on a separate sheet of paper, because I was still figuring out perspective, and I would draw that. I had my dad, who was a carpenter. He built my drawing board, the one I have right now, and he put like a system on the side where I could put these wings on. And I could use, they extended it out for us so I could get this long perspective of the horizon line. And I could move it up and down so that I could, I would screw it in. The wings had wing nuts, and I'd screw it and I'd move it up or down, depending on if I wanted it to be, like it's like a Mobius thing, or because I mean, certain things you really have to put that vanishing point out there. But I don't know if I've made any sense. I mean, I'm a kind of guy. Don't do what I say because I don't know. It kind of works for me. I doubt that it'd work for anybody else. I don't know.
It's something that I often think about looking at your work, like because it does feel very accurate when it comes to the perspective and stuff, and knowing that you have this like secret tool, fantastic, man.
If I had it, I could. I don't have it because I don't use it too much anymore because I've kind of figured things out where I don't have to do it that much. But,
one other piece that came up in conversation though was the Sears catalog. Can you go into some detail with that? Because in some of our earlier videos, like we were wondering, like, does Geof just have photographic memory? Like when you draw a spark plug, you're drawing a fucking spark plug. What's that right there?
That's my Sears catalog. You could find these things, and they've got an index. And like when I was, I was just, because in the old days you could find anything in one of these catalogs. I mean, kitchen sinks and automotive equipment, and you just look. Oh, I need to draw a spark plug. And I mean, actually, for the spark plug, I actually had a spark plug. I found one because I'd be walking around, and my daughter, she's like, I just pick things up and I put them in my pocket and bring them home because I might have to draw a spark plug someday. So in Hard Boiled, at the end, when that woman says just to charge yourself on a battery, I think I drew a spark plug because I had that thing sitting there. Oh, I'll put it in a spark plug. That's kind of funny. But yeah, I would. Yeah, and I have. I don't have much of them anymore, but replica guns that I hold and use, and it's. And I know I just lack of confidence. But I mean, I can actually draw very fast. I can draw. I think Jim, maybe you saw me. Like I'll sit at the convention and I'll kind of doodle on the table.
Yeah, anybody that hasn't caught up to you at a show, you often bring sort of a portfolio of drawings to those.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, because I always figure, I don't know, because I just figure, I try to make them. I've had art dealers go, "Oh, you sell your stuff too cheap. It lowers the value of your originals." But I don't know who's going to want to spend, what I think it's worth. So I do these drawings before I come of whatever I want, and I sell them for a couple hundred or 300. I figure maybe that's a lot of money. I mean, it is, but it's not as much as, And I don't like doing commissions. I don't know about you guys, but yeah, because there's never anything I want to do. It's like, I want you to do Batman. He's with Catwoman and they're fighting Thanos. And I'm like, yeah, I don't think so.
Do you feel any nostalgia for any of like the Marvel DC characters?
Yeah, I do, but I've come so close so many times to doing it, to pushing that button and doing it. Like I said, I almost did Batman versus Predator. Dave Gibbons had asked me to do that. And I was thinking about doing it because it had a lot of cool stuff in it. But I think it was the second Batman was coming out. It had that whole thing where I think Mignola did the covers where they killed off one of the Robins right before the Batman movie came out. And it was like parents are like, "Oh, are they going to kill Batman or Robin?" And whatever. And so they didn't want it. And they knew what I drew. And they were afraid I was going to draw something where I'd have, intestines everywhere.
That's appropriate for Predator, though.
I mean, because there was that whole Hollywood that crazy stuff where you can kill as many people as you want in a movie, but you can't kill a dog. I remember Dark Horse saying that, they in one of their Predator comics, they killed a dog and they just went crazy. And they had despite the fact that he's like gutting people and putting the heads on, in his car while he's driving around, whatever the hell it is. And that hypocrisy of it all. I mean, I could go on forever, but so they were concerned, and I said, well, you better get somebody else. And I don't know, I can't think of any. There's a couple other things that there was Andrew Vax, who I'm very close with. He did a novel and they wanted to do a comic version of it. And Archie Goodwin, when he told Archie Goodwin he wanted me to draw it, and I think they thought I would just be too slow. They're probably right. And so they got, I think Dennis Cowan did it. But yeah, I'm just not, I don't know. I'm not a very good team player anyway. So
Geoff, you went to art school, I believe.
yeah.
Did you, at the time, was your plan, was it always comics? Was that always sort of like the ultimate goal?
Yeah. I know my friends that, like, I went to school with another artist. His name is Gary Gianni. He draws comics. We were classmates, and we came in like just after Mike Grell had been there the year before we came in, and he would come back and visit, and because he was, oh, Mike Grell, he made it into comics. Oh, you know, because the first thing I think they ever did was they gave him, in those days you had to draw. They would never let you work on a, you know, big character. You had to like get a backup. And I think they had him do it. I think it was Aqualad or something like that, or one of the Legion of Superheroes. I don't know, but it always kind of bothered me because I could tell, this is what I'm making now. Oh, that figure! I know that figure. He swiped that figure from Neil Adams. That bothered me. I'm not a. I don't know how you guys feel about that. It really rubs me the wrong way. I've had people swipe stuff from me, and I go, yeah, I'm not.
I feel like Avatar Comics sort of like has a whole wing of Geof Darrow clone guys.
Yeah,
What do you think about that stuff?
There was a guy that, and I was not happy. I get a call from Frank Miller's lawyer, and he goes, well, they're gonna, because Frank had written a lot of scripts for RoboCop, and some of them they didn't get made, so they were going to adapt them into comics, and they did like a series, and they hired this guy, and they said, we just want you to know that, you know, this guy, he really likes you, and he's kind of da da da. And I said, well, then why are you? I said, Frank, why are you going to use this guy if he's going to rip me off? And he kind of did, and I didn't like that much. Everybody has their influences. I know mine are obvious, but I don't think you should copy somebody's drawing. Although I never know if I've told you this story. There's that guy in Japan. I was going to do a book for Kodansha in the late 80s, early 90s. And out of the blue, I get this package from him with a letter of apology. And some guy that they had hired had done this comic story. God, I wish I could find it. I must have it somewhere. And he did this whole story, and like 4 of the pages are just bits and pieces of hard-boiled that he's traced. I mean, he was tracing cigarette butts that I drew in hands. I mean, just crazy stuff that, you know, just draw the damn thing. I was so kind of flattered by that because it was so goofy. And they said, oh, we'll never let him do this again. And we apologize. And I said, I don't, you know, I was so amused by that. I didn't care about because it was so funny. It was just, but yeah, I mean, I don't know. I know that Wally Wood has that thing where he says, well, you're not, why draw when you can, you know. I mean, you know, and it's easy for me because people have to make a living and you have to do it fast. And I've never, ever been a guy that, I don't know how I've survived as long as I have. Drawing, because I haven't done that many comics. And just when things are looking out, I'll work on some movie and, you know, they pay a lot of money. And I don't enjoy as much anymore doing that stuff. I mean, I worked on The Matrix, and today they released the trailer for the new one, and I worked on that one, and I'm pretty excited to see it, but it's hard. I mean, I was sitting in a room with another artist, Steve Scroce, and we would talk about, oh, I wish I was drawing comics. That's what I wanted to do. But anyway, yeah, I always wanted to draw comics. Some of my friends I went to art school with, they wanted to be illustrators. And sadly, you know, illustration is it's pretty dicey. I mean, in terms of getting work, because on a lot of the paperback companies, which are really big, they use these photo montage because it's just cheaper. And there's very few that I know of covers that are painted. Even movie posters. When those Matrix movies came out, I got to go on all these press junkets. And that's what the head of Warner Brothers. And I asked him about it. I said, gee, you know, how come you guys don't do movie posters anymore? I mean, artwork posters. The only ones that would be done at that point were just the Struzan ones because that's what Lucas wanted, and he was a god. He said, gee, we'd like to do them, but so many of the actors have right of approval. They're the way they're drawn. So you might get, you know, Paul Newman likes his face, but Meg Ryan doesn't like the way she looks, and they have to go do it over. It's just doing the Photoshop stuff is just the easiest and cheapest and way to do it. I mean,
there's a famous story with the Dan Clowes movie poster for the movie Happiness, and he had to do some paste ups over some of the characters. It's an ensemble cast, maybe 8 characters on this poster. And the guy who had the biggest trouble with his likeness, and he said, if you see the original, there are like 8 paste ups of this head. John Lovitz.
I mean, even in the comics, I remember like Dark Horse, and they were doing those Buffy comics. Like the guy, Ryan Sook, who was a really good artist, was doing some of it. Like, and the guy that plays Spike was pissed off because he didn't like the way he looked. And another guy, I think the guy that was, what's his name? The other part of the Scooby crew, he's like twins in reality. You know, that character, he's got black hair, but anyway, he didn't like the way Brendan something or other. He didn't like the way he looked. I just remember the gal, not Sarah Michelle Gellar, but the other one that was on How I Married My Wife as well. I can't think of what her name is. She thought, wow, it's great, because Arthur Adams had drawn the covers. Like, wow, he gave me these great long legs. I love it.
So you've been working in America with Dark Horse for pretty much since the beginning, from Hard Boiled times. I wonder, before that, like in the 80s, what was the vision for what comics would, you know, in terms of publishing in American comics? Like, what were you thinking would be a good model for you? Or
well, I didn't, you know, that's why I went to Europe, because I didn't want to do superhero. I don't think I could do it. And I remember that first story I did, I remember showing it to Archie Goodwin, and he said, wow, it's really nice. But he said, what would I do with it? Said, publish it. But no, it was just, in those days, you know, you had to fit that style. And I was doing, you know, maybe you're familiar with the Hergé Tintin style, which is ligne claire, which is, you know, just line. I mean, I don't spot blacks. I don't, and the reason I don't is just because I'm so, I worry about my drawing, and I want to, and I think I want to draw it so that I make sure it's all right. Like if I draw a car, I want to draw it so it, you know, if I put it in shadow, I'm covering something up. But that's just me. You know, I want people to see that I can actually draw that car, and you can't, in my mind anyway, you can't really hide it if you're drawing it just in line. You can't, because I had friends that would like always draw, you know, didn't like drawing feet, and that's the bane of a lot of people. And they'd put them in shadows. There's nothing wrong with that, but I was like, well, I don't want to ever not have to be able to draw something, because machines for me were really hard. And I worked in the summers. I'd work in the Quaker Oats plant. I worked in this, and I'd just look at the machines. And it's like, oh, there's this gear and there's that. And then when I learned perspective, it also helped me to. I never would have thought that I would do so well, like, you know, like in the Matrix, doing all this that machine stuff, because that wasn't. I just wanted to draw monsters and things, and somehow I, you know.
I wondered if the not spotting blacks was something that had come from your animation background. You know, shadows are so different in animation.
No, I have a lot of it. Like I said, it came from looking at Mobius, because he has that style as well. The Mobius style is kind of ligne claire. He puts blacks in there, but not a lot. And then looking at, because I moved to France, and I was very, and this is probably something you can't tell from it, I was hugely influenced by Von Baudet. And if you saw any of my really older stuff, I colored in markers, and I inked like that. And because I saw him draw once at right before he died, the New York comic, the Phil Suling New York Comic Show, which was the San Diego show of its time. And he was in a lobby just drawing. Someone had hired him. He was drawing the masked lizard with a machine gun, and it was just like watching a magic act to me. I'd never seen anybody draw like that. And he's just drawing, and and he, at that time, he would dress. His fingernails were painted, and I mean, which in the, you know, this like 1975, which is like putting a target on your back. There's these two old ladies were sitting there it was in the hotel lobby, and they're watching it go, he's lost to us. He's lost to the Lord. That young man is lost to the Lord. It's just so funny. God, he was so good. So my original style was a lot like Von Baudet, and it just kind of went from there. I just stopped at that point doing blacks. I was drawing stuff. I was very influenced by Steranko, another one, and I met him that same year because my friend Gary Gianni and them, they knew him. And so we got to show him my portfolio. And I remember him going through it like this. That's interesting. But I held on to that. That's interesting.
What was
from looking at Tintin? And there's another guy called Ted Benoit, who I just really loved. And they all drew in perspective. And then, Otomo, right, which I turned, that's the guy, I remember showing him to Mobius. Mobius had no idea. I go, look at this guy.
Geof, do you do a lot of like sketching and underdrawing when you're working out your panels or compositions?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I kind of figure out my layouts in my little sketchbooks. I don't know if I got one here. Like, and they're very, very loose. And I'm mostly trying to figure out what the point of view is. The kind of, I guess maybe from working in movies, the frame, the framing of the shot. Like here's, I don't know if you can see this, but these are really loose. But I kind of know what does that make any sense?
Yeah, that's great.
I mean, they're just, I've never printed any of these. They're kind of, but yeah, I figure out what my layout is, what the vanishing point, what is, and what the word am I looking here for? Like a camera shot, I always think like, this. And actually my wife, who's a filmmaker, she helped me, like, because I'd watch movies, and I just watch movies, I didn't really pay much attention to what was going on in terms of the cinematography. And there was we were watching an Anthony Mann film, and Anthony Mann did these great westerns. They're just fantastic, very brutal for their time, with Jimmy Stewart. And she pointed out that in his movies, he has this great sense of a foreground, middle ground, and background. And he played with that so much. And ever since I think about it, I always, if you look at my stuff, I'll overlap figures, and I'll put something in the middle, and I put something in the back. And, sometimes like I'll draw out a figure, and I go, oh, I got to write. And I go, yeah, but if there was like a hand or a guy running across, and then I have to erase part of it. And it's like, I went through all that trouble figuring it out. But do I have enough guts to cover up something? I guess I do sometimes.
Geof, growing up in Iowa, what were you part of comics fandom in some way? Like, this is a new wrinkle, knowing that you were going to those Phil Suling New York Comic Cons. So I'm so curious about like access to comics, access to discovering Von Bode in Iowa. I know you said that you got that Gil Kane Savage book like off the newsstand in Iowa. So that's an interesting thing.
Yeah. Because I thought it was Doc Savage, and that's why I bought it. I didn't even look inside of it. I just, they did a comic book of Doc Savage. And I bought it, and when I got home, I read it. I go, fuck, this isn't Doc Savage. That thing influenced me a lot. But anyway, no, it was really hard, because then there used to be, you could find them in all the supermarkets, and you go into a drugstore, and they'd have like a fountain, and you could, my parents would give me $0.25 a week, and I'd buy a 12-cent comic, and often I'd get 2 of them because I, like comics, and bypass the soda or the pop, whatever. But then those things started dying out, and I could not find comics. And I had to go to a little town that still had a soda fountain. It's called Central City. And it was like, I don't know, my grandmother had a cabin she'd go to, and then I'd go out and stay with her at her cabin just so we could pass through this little town. It's the only place you could find comics, because no one was selling them in stores in Cedar Rapids. That's where it came from anymore. And I actually subscribed to Marvel comics, all the Marvel ones. But in those days, they would fold them and put them in a paper slip and mail them to you. So I had all these comics and I'm not that, condition wise, but it's still like, come on, man, it's because it's folded in half. And I still have some of them. Well, not very many of them. Then they've got that bend in them, so we couldn't find them. And there were a couple kids. There was a summer when all my brother's friends and us everybody was collecting comics. And this guy collected Turok, and this guy collected the Hulk, and this guy was into. But there were a couple guys who, for some reason, they had a lot of comics, and they kind of grew out of it. But I was the only one that didn't. And I kept track of these guys. I knew that they never wanted to get rid of them when they were into it. Now that they weren't into it, they were chasing girls, so they needed money. And so that's where I got my Fantastic Four #1, which I paid $1 for, which was a lot of money at that point. But none of these guys wanted it. So I went in there and I just, that's how I completed a lot of my collection. That and a guy called Howard Rogofsky, which is the biggest fucking crook in it. He had ads in Marvel Comics, and his condition, and you'd get it, and like the cover would be torn off, and he just was, an overpriced, but I kind of completed some of my stuff from getting to him. But there were maybe one or two other kids that kind of continued, but they all once the hormones kicked in, because I'm somewhat of a late bloomer. I just wasn't. I was just trying to draw comics and collect them, and they all. I mean, I had them in boxes, and so there wasn't much of a fandom. There was one guy that actually did some underground comics, and that's where I wasn't as much into those, because I didn't like humor stuff, and I'm still not much of a horror guy. But I found Rolf by Richard Corbin, which was a huge thing to me. And they had Von Baudet, his a couple comics. He did Jungwaffel, and it had Cobalt. I don't know if I don't remember if it's 90 or 60. But that
it's
was
so funny because I was thinking 40.
Yeah, that thing was a huge influence on me, because it's cartoony, but it was the most violent thing I'd ever seen, because it starts out with a guy getting his head blown off and an eyeball flying out, and I was like, wow. And guys riding on, like, he's just riding on a dinosaur, and he drew guns fairly accurately. But but other than that, it wasn't until I went to art school. The only reason I went to that art school is because they had they offered cartooning. The only place they had a cartooning class, and I guess at some point Bill Malden and went there, the World War II and political cartoonist, and Disney. But I think Disney was there for like 4 months. But they had one of the Cell from Sleeping Beauty there, and Hal Foster supposedly went there for, once again, God knows, a couple of weeks probably. And they had like a Prince Valiant page. So I went there, but the guy that taught the cartooning class was one of those gag guys, It'd be like, hey, hey, Biff, what do we have for dinner? A million things. Really? Yeah, beans. That kind of humor. And he was always talking about Smokey Stover, and so I draw. There a bunch of us wanted to draw comics, and he'd be like, "Well, I don't know much about comics, so I guess that's good enough." And so I didn't learn anything from that guy. But the interesting thing about that guy was that he was friends with Hugh Hefner. And Hugh Hefner was a big comics guy, a cartoon guy. And when he started out Playboy, this teacher guy goes, yeah, I kind of made a mistake. He wanted me to draw cartoons for Playboy, but I didn't think it would go anywhere. So he didn't get on.
There it is, man. He got his like little instructor thing to offset that mistake.
Yeah, you wonder about following that guy's advice. Ask him his advice and do the opposite.
It's always the way, man.
I did that with Frank. I remember it was Frank telling me, he goes, what are you working on? I go, oh, I'm going to do this kind of a Western thing. He goes, whatever you do, don't put the word cowboy in the title. Okay.
What
does he know?
Speaking of Frank, he gives you a shout out in Electra Lives Again, and that style of drawing, I don't see much black on the page, and it looks like a pretty clear line. So your influence?
Well, yeah, that was, he would, because we would talk about Lena Claire, and he wanted to try it, and so he and I think it's because of that Sin City became what it was, because he said, I'm never going to do that again. It's too much work. Because he drew like that staircase sequence, and he was figuring out the perspective. And we were, I'd go over to his loft, and he'd show me stuff, and I don't think I'd ever talked to him about, because I never was like, I'm not going to give anybody drawing advice. What the hell do I know? I was like the guys that come up to you like, and I go, look, I'm not that guy. I don't know what I'm doing. So I sure as hell aren't going to tell you what to do, unless you ask me really just specific thing. Because I never want to discourage anybody, because I've seen comic artists discourage people at these shows that you don't know, and you just don't know. That guy, he might be really crude right now, but because there's guys that I've seen their stuff, and it's like 2 years later, holy cow, what happened? Somebody flicked a switch in that guy's head, and he's fantastic. So but yeah, Frank. So we would talk about, I would talk to him about like cars and things, because he would draw things and they weren't right. And I would say like telephones and things. I just talk about the fact that, I wouldn't talk about him in general. I just say, people, they draw telephones wrong and they got one in the room and they don't bother to look at it. They draw what they think something looks like. And it's just as easy to look at one, and it makes it, it doesn't mean it has to be photorealistic, but if you've got a foundation for what you're drawing, it's a little easier. If you know, like what a pair of scissors, if you look at one, you see how they work. Then when you draw it, it makes it opens up another avenue to how to draw the scissors or whatever item is. So we would talk about that with cars. And I was buying these Franklin Mint cars because they're so well done. The doors open and the wheels turn and the undercarriages. Because I always see guys in comics that draw like cars and they look underneath and they're like those metal cars that you buy and there's just an axle underneath. There's no transmission. There's no drive shaft, and it's like it's all magic under there. And
shadows. That's where the shadows go.
That's the old McFarlane thing. When in doubt, black it out. It's the opposite of the Geof Darrow philosophy.
Well, yeah, I like I say, don't do like I said, because me. I'm like a one-way road to Nowheresville doing that. But so he would, yeah. I think that was part of it because I was very, I guess. I think the word is supportive, but we'd talk about that kind of stuff. And I don't, like I said, it was really secretive. He would see bits of hard boiled, like a couple pages at a time. And I mean, there'd be like months would go, he wouldn't see anything. And then, because I figured, well, it's too late. I mean, I did that when I worked on movies. I would not show, when I worked on the Matrix film, I told them in advance, I said, look, you have to put me in a corner and leave me alone, because my wife brought my can in, but because I'm so insecure that if you make the least of the, I won't finish the drawing. And so they would like wait, and they were very patient. Like, some of these things, they wouldn't take me a week or so to draw, but I had already done drawings for them that they'd seen. They go, and they trusted me. They're really, really trusting. And they're very hands-on, like not like most movie directors. Every day they'd come in and talk to every artist. Everybody, and most of those guys that I was working with on those films hadn't worked on so many movies. They said, sometimes we never even see the director. We've never been with guys that are that hands-on because they knew what they wanted. But so with Frank, it was the same way. I wouldn't show him anything, and but he was, he's very, very patient.
I remember him saying something somewhere that the revenge he got on you with the craziness of Hard Boiled was he added a lot of verbosity to Big Guy.
Yeah, well, maybe I've told this. I have to pick up my drawings because my wife put the cat in the room. They are. If there's paper, that's like a carpet to them. Yeah, because I was drawing. I remember I was in Normandy in France, and I'd drawn the thing, and I said, "Well, Frank," he goes, "Well, I got to do the dialogue and da da da." And I said, "Well, Frank, I don't think that, I don't know how much dialogue you can actually put in this thing, because unless you make the monster talk, I mean, it's mostly, it's an odd comic. I mean, when the comic came out, because the big guy isn't even in the first one." And so surprisingly enough, yeah, he gave the monster dialogue. And I always maintain, because he wanted to do it for kids, and I always maintained all those people were dead that turned into monsters. But he's like, he gave him that great thing of like tranqua bullets or whatever it was, and they all kind of survived. But he wanted to do another one, and that's why I can't do this. He wanted to do one where the big guy gets shrunk down, because he says, I want to see you draw him holding a big pencil. Oh, I don't want to draw that. I'm going to draw like monsters and robots and shrinking them down because he knew I could draw as good at drawing objects, and he thought it'd be funny. It probably would have been great, but anyway.
It's a lot of carpet fiber you'd be drawing.
Yeah. I've never been a fan of the Atom. Beautifully drawn.
Geof, you were describing Von Baudet's Cobalt series, and as you were describing it, I felt like you could have been describing Shaolin Cowboy in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
I wonder if we could talk a minute or a little bit about, how that comic comes together. I've seen like little bits of Bourbon Threat, a comic that you did in the 80s, and it feels like there's a lot of things that are consistent there.
Well, that's him. It's the same character. I mean, in fact, I'm giving something away here. And I think in the second one, I don't know if you've read it, but there's a point where this guy comes from hell, this kind of celestial figure comes back, and he's going to take him to hell, but he has to be able to say his name. And so he said, because he's all had all these assumed names. At one point, he starts to say Burr, but no, it's the same guy. Yeah, because I mean, I was a big Japanese movie fan, and I loved Zatoichi. I liked the actor Shintaro Katsu, and he's kind of modeled on him. He's kind of modeled on him in a drawing that Mobius did once that I was just loved. It was like a Christmas thing. It was a guy with a big nose, and I just thought what I liked in Japanese films was you'd have guys that were heroes that didn't look like it, and that's what I liked about. I really like that movie Nobody with Bob Odenkirk, because it's like the idea that I really like those John Wick movies, but when he walks into the room, he's gonna kick your ass. But Bob Odenkirk and Nobody, you just don't see it coming. And in the Japanese movies, they'd have these guys, and the guy that played Shintaro Katsu, at least for me, he's not, by my occidental eyes, he's not Brad Pitt. And everybody's kind of pissing on him, shitting on him, and then they're messing with the wrong guy. And I always wanted to do a comic about a guy that you mess with the wrong guy, because you wouldn't. I mean, if you look at that guy, you wouldn't expect him to be able to do all the stupid shit that he does. So
it looks like you used some of your animation chops, like in choreographing these zombie fight scenes and all of that mayhem.
Yeah, but I see. I never really did any animation. I just did, but it's from watching movies. I guess Sam Raimi and the way he moves a camera around, and John Woo and Choi Hark, and no, I don't know. Although I've been when I did that one with the zombies, I got a lot of flack because people were like, "Oh, it's the same thing, the same drawing over and over." It's not the same drawing.
Not even close.
But people think it is, and I the one thing I regret was when it came out, was that whole long fight was supposed to take place in one comic. One was going to be 3 issues, and Darker said, "Oh, we make money if there's 4 issues." Because I just like the whole idea of it just going on, and I had to stop myself because I thought I could keep going. I just want to see at what point I could piss people off. It just keeps killing it, because I love Kirkman. I love The Walking Dead and all that, but it's like I'm generally even that like a TV show I'm watching. When are they going to start killing zombies? And I thought I'm going to do a thing where that's all you get. I'm going to get this out of my system where I kill zombies. I used to have, when you hear the story about it, I hung out a lot with Alejandro Jodorowsky in Paris. I go and watch movies with him, and we'd talk about stuff. And I said, I have these recurring nightmares where I'm getting killed by zombies. It would happen all the time. I'd be like somewhere and zombies would come out. I had one dream where I was like in a YMCA, and I'm in the pool room, and the pool's full of zombies, and I have this pole, and I have to keep them from climbing out. So I have to run from one end of the pool to the other, pushing these zombies off with this pole. And I can never escape. And I just have these all the time. And Jodorowsky says, "Darrow, let me try something." And he kind of hypnotized me. And afterwards, it was like a few days later, I have a dream. And in the dream, I'm in a parking lot, and there's zombies everywhere. It's one of those car parking lots like it's San Diego that did, like 20 stories of cars. And I go, and they're everywhere. And I go, what the fuck am I going to do? And all of a sudden, come jumping out of the air is Bernadette the Shaolin Cowboy. And he starts killing them all. And I was like, holy shit. And like, he kills them all. He's killing them all this. And I remember waking up and going, oh my, that's the greatest dream I've ever had. And I went back to sleep, and it started again. And he's like, because I was so happy. And that was the end of the zombie dreams. So Jodorowsky helped me with so that was kind of that comic Shem Buffet, which is also a tribute to Sam Raimi, because they always, the Shemp, he goes, refers to the Shemp in his movies.
Yeah, fake Shemp or whatever. Bruce
Like
Campbell.
Bruce Campbell, I think in Miller's Crossing, because he worked, he's very close to the Coens, and I think not Bruce Campbell. I think it's actually Sam Raimi that gets shot by this guy with a machine gun. He called it the Shep dance because he just, So I thought I'm gonna, because I'm a big fan.
Do you have plans to release Bourbon Threat?
They talked about it. I don't know.
I was going to say, I feel like Dark Horse has been mentioning releasing it for decades.
I just kind of, finally sent them all the color, because the color back, it's the Blue Line stuff. The interesting about the color is that it was done. Part of it was done. The first story is completely done, and the second was halfway done when the colorist quit. And she was the niece of Hergé, and she did the color at Studio Hergé. She colored all the Tintin stuff, and she liked and I asked for her because I love the Tintin color, and so she colored that first story, and you can see it. I mean, it's just beautiful. But it's that Blue Line technology where probably now they can fix it, but there's always that little bit of a registration problem. You kind of go for the best you can get, but there'll always be something a little off, because they wrap it around her drum and it gets kind of, if it gets wet, but it's almost impossible. I mean, and back then, I mean, like, we've talked, I know when I listen to you guys talk about Hardboiled, I was not a fan of the color, and I picked her, but she did the first 40 pages before I saw anything, and it was Blue Line, and I just didn't feel like I could, that's a lot of work. I mean, you can't just change, you have to do it all over. And there goes my cat.
I wondered about color. I'm glad you brought that up. I think of your work as being so meticulous, and I wonder, do you do any coloring yourself? Do you do like a little bit of color to sort of let the...
No, I did a long time ago. Like I said, I would color kind of like Von Baudet. I'd do these. The only piece of color that's ever been printed of mine, and it looks pretty bad, is the back cover of one of the issues of Big Guy did Rusty. I thought it'd be shrunk down, but they kind of printed it oversized so you can see all the magic marker things. And I always wanted to, but the drawings are so complicated. Sometimes I'm like, I just don't have I don't have any. As it is, like, I'm inking, and every day I'm like, why did I draw all this stuff? Sometimes I can't figure out what I drew because I have this overlapping stuff. And there's this little line in there, and I'm like, what is that? What did I'll have to stop for 5 minutes and think about it. And I go, oh, that's part of his thumb, because I'll have to like think through the connecting tissue behind whatever's in front of it. And it just, sometimes I just give up and like, I just ink whatever is there. Because you got to put a certain, I don't know, I hope I do it. You have to weight, I try to put weight on certain things. And then, like if it's an outline, but if I don't know what it is, you have to know, you guys know that you have to know what you're inking. It's not just copying the pencil. You have to understand, the arm or whatever it is that you're drawing. And anybody that says that you don't, it's not, I think they're crazy, because you have to understand it. And sometimes it's like I say, I've got like, these complicated, like even when I was working on your cover, Ed, I was like, what the hell where's this cable go? What's it connected to? I have to stop and try to figure it out. Okay.
Do you enter some like a kind of a flow state, a meditative space? Does the day just disappear when you put pencil to paper or pen to paper? It's a lot of work. You can't be taking too many breaks. Something tells me you're not on Instagram every half hour or something.
No, I like now I try to get up, and because I'm not a young guy, and I get up to walk just because well, I had an accident a long time ago where I severed the muscles in the quadricep muscles in both my legs, and that took me out of the picture for several months. And so and they're not the way they used to be, so I have to walk to make sure that they kind of. So I get up to walk, but sometimes, and then other times, I don't know if you guys run into this, it's just like, God damn, I can't get started. It's just, I'm overwhelmed by it, by what it is that I have to, but once I actually start, then I'm fine. Sometimes you forget that, you're like, I feel good, and And then afterwards, I'm like, afterwards I go, and sometimes that scares me too, because I think afterwards, ooh, no, that wasn't. Because I don't do drugs. I never really did, but I did smoke marijuana a few times and drew while I was doing it. And I was so convinced I was a genius, you know. And the day after, I was like, ooh, nope, that ain't working. And I never, you know, I mean, a lot of people thought, because the French thought I was like a drug addict. Did I ever tell you this story about this TV interview with the pig heads? And
No.
so Hardboiled was coming. Hardboiled had come out, at least because it was split up into 2 books here. And here, come here. And there he is, my big old Maine Coon cat. He so that they sent me to what town was it? I don't know, the French city of I can't think of it, Amiens or something like that. And they were going to do a TV interview with me. And so I take the train, I go out there, and you know, it's like a 2-hour, 3-hour train ride. And I show up, and of course, I walk to the TV station, and I show up, and they said, "Can I help you?" And I said, "Yes, I'm here for the interview." And I said, "Who are you?" And I said, "I'm Geof Darrow." They get this kind of shocked look on their face, and they go, "You're Geof Darrow?" I said, "Yeah." And they go off, and they brings these people out, and they look at me. "You're Geof Darrow?" I said, "Yeah." Because we imagined you as having like a mohawk haircut and piercings and tattoos and this and that. And I said, no, it's just because I'm very conservative looking. It's like, okay, well, we're going to do some makeup on you. I said, makeup. So yeah, we're going to do a thing where you like your throat is cut. And they're going to do this prosthetic thing where my throat is cut while they interview me. And I said, no, I don't, I think I'm here to perform. And they said, well, oh, okay. So they let that go. Then they take me to this room, and they have on a platter 2 pig heads and a chainsaw. And they want me to be cutting up, answering questions, and then cutting up a pig head with a chainsaw. And I said, look, you know, I don't know. I'm not here for that. I said, it makes no sense. And I said, about the best you could maybe get me to do is to make it look like I sharpen my pencils with a chainsaw, because that might be kind of funny, but I'm not going to cut up pig heads. And so I'm doing the interview, and these people are coming in and out of the studio and going, why isn't he cutting up the pig heads? And they're talking in French. Go, no, he's not going to cut the pig heads. What about the pig heads? And because that was their budget for this thing, was buying these pig heads. It's a good story. I thought I was.
It's a heck of a career, Geof. Whenever that's a concern.
Is there anything that you ever had, you know, that kind of stuff? Or?
For sure. In France, by the way. Like I remember getting set up for some sort of interview, and the pictures that they used in the magazine were like in between photos, and like where I wasn't nearly ready. It was like shooting up my nose and stuff. And I think it was because the guys who set it up, they were actually arguing with my publisher like earlier, because they showed up a little too late. So they just did it as like revenge on the publisher. And my thought was like, well, why even do anything? You know, why publish something that looks half ready, or, you know, unfinished or unpolished? And, you know, I have no idea.
They always want you to perform. And it's like, I mean, they did that with Walt Simons, because they heard he played the piano. And that's when I first met Walt Simons, was at Angoulême. And Walt, he's a really sweet, nice guy. There's no way I'm not doing that. I'm not here to perform. I don't know how, maybe I'm not that great a piano player, but always, yeah, that's, and I never saw the thing, because they never tell me. I remember my landlord at the time, was always giving me static about stuff, because you can't hang out your laundry on the balcony, which is because it's considered unsightful, and you can get a ticket, you know, for hanging your laundry on the. So he was always like, oh, I was like the bad penny of the building. He was always. And then one day he's like, oh, I saw you on television last night, and after that I was golden to the guy. So I guess it was good for that, but I never saw it. So I don't.
It's probably good you didn't go with the slit throat or anything. You know, that might have been a whole different reaction from the landlord.
They didn't even take me back to the train station either. Okay, bye. And I was like, okay.
But Jeff, are you at least a little curious what it would look like to see a chainsaw run through a pig's head?
Oh yeah, but at this time it was like, I wasn't there to perform, and I told him, I said, if you pay me, I'll do it. But I just, you know, I mean, I'm kind of reticent about chainsaws. I had an uncle that cut his leg off with a chainsaw, so I'm kind of a little nervous around. Although, I drew so many of them, and that got that out of my system. Drawing chainsaws, they're you've drawn them, and they're the worst part of a chainsaw is that blade.
Absolutely.
Teeth around there, because after a while, because I just give up, because there's all that. There's a little, I don't know, like a nut, and there's like not a wing bolt, but it's like an H-shaped thing that with screws through it, and then
Like a bike chain gimmick.
yeah, exactly.
I feel like you write those sequences, Jeff, the ones with the chainsaw.
It's pretty
You're
long.
responsible for that.
I know, I don't mean it to be that way, because I don't even know where that came from, because actually it came from, I did a drawing for Mike Mignoli, did this Christmas special, and that was the first time he got that Shaolin Cowboy was printed in America. Was he's just walking into town, and I thought, well, he's gonna have some kind of weapon. I go, oh, what if he had like this chainsaw on a pole? That'd be funny, because I'd loved the Evil Dead movies, and so I drew that. And then it was years later, I think, well, I got to do this. Action sequence, and I've been watching these kung fu movies with guys with staffs. Wow, what if I? So anyway.
I mean, it looks so functional too. Like there's like the little bicycle brake handle thing to get it to work.
Yeah, exactly.
Fucking genius, man.
Genius. The thing I like about, I do like the fact that you've got the gauge for the gas at the top.
Yeah, it's genius.
I mean, I think the best thing in that comic, the thing that I like in that comic is, because I mean, people always just say, "Oh, there's nothing happens, and it's not about anything." And for me, there is actually a meaning behind all that stuff. The French actually, I think, kind of got it, but in America, it was like I say, people were just like, "What a waste of." I've had guys go, wow, that's like the most time-consuming joke I've ever seen. Yeah, well, I guess because I love what you guys do, because you're so smart, and I can't, I always think people are going to get bored if I stop and have people talk. Although the one I'm doing now actually has some talking in it, although he doesn't talk much.
Comics has become such a writer-driven medium when it comes to like the big two Marvel DC stuff. So like when you get something that's more visually driven, like it really sticks out on the racks, man. That's something that I really like about this work.
It's nice to say. I don't know, because I mean, I have to, because I have to be honest. I didn't know. I know, Jim, you said we met at a convention, but anyhow, those things I don't remember.
Sure.
But it was Steve Scroce that said, "Oh, you ever listen to Cartoon Kayfabe?" And I said, because I hardly ever go on YouTube. I said, no, I never heard of it. And they go, "Oh, these guys," and I go, "Oh yeah," because he spoke so highly of it. And I said, well, and then I think he told me that they were gonna, because I think you contacted somehow, maybe through Steve, got hold of me, and I thought you guys were going to ask me the same questions ever, because I hadn't listened to you at that point, that everybody does, and I just am so tired of saying, "What's Frank Miller like?" For breakfast, and and how are the Wachowskis, and then it's like, so I know I think I was polite, maybe not, kind of blew you up, and then after I watch it, I go, these guys are so smart and funny, and you like what you do, and I mean, I feel like when I put you guys on, like I'm in a studio with somebody, like I have compatriots, because I just sit here by myself, and I'm like, I don't feel like I'm part of a community. But when I listen to your guys, I feel like, wow, I'm part of although I'm always intimidated, because I listen to these guys, I go, when you guys start talking about craft tint, and I was like, I'm such a loser. I got a pen and a paper, and that's all I do. And it's like, you guys are,
Jeff, do you have a peer group out there? People that you maybe catch dinner with every now and then or something?
I'm a weird guy. I don't hear it, not at all. I mean, even Mobius, when I didn't want to bother him, and I'd call him on occasion. And when I would see him, he said, "How come you don't call?" And I said, "Well, I don't want to bother you." And he goes, "But you don't bother me." And even after years, I went to his funeral. I went when he died. I was talking to his wife. And he said to me, "Jean and I always wondered why you don't call, why you didn't come." I said, "I just didn't want to bother you." And because I guys like that, they just have so many people. I see people after Jean all the time, and I never wanted him to be like, "Oh God, here's a Darrow guy again. He's gonna." And I probably wasted a lot of. I remember there's like one time, my God, he calls me up and he says, "Oh, Geof, Otomo's coming over to the house. Do you want to come?" I said, and I'd met and actually had lunch with Otomo. And I said, yeah, because Steam Boy is coming out. So I remember I go over to his house, and it was just to meet it. I think it was 3:30 or something. And I got there, and it wasn't 3:30 yet. I don't want to bother. Once again, I'll wait till 3:30. I'm going to be precise. And this limo pulls up, and here out comes Otomo with like 4 people with him. And I just kind of follow in behind him. And I just say, they're like, "Who is this big goofy guy?" And we go into this room, and I sit in the back, and I just listen to Jean talk through the interpreters to Otomo. And it was so funny because Otomo brought in there's like a storyboard book of Steam Boy. And Jean sometimes would say things that were just like, "Oh my God," because he's just very honest. And he said, and he hadn't seen the film yet. And he's looking. Oh, no, he had seen the film, and he's looking at the drawings. He goes, because Otomo had worked on a film called Metropolis a little bit before that, with this. I think one of the guys was Rentaro, but he said, "I really like that movie." And I was like, "Ooh." And so he presents him with this book, and they're all going to go out to dinner. They go, "Come on, Geof, come to dinner." I go, "Oh, no. They said, like, I know at those dinners, I don't know if you do this, but when you have interpreters, after a while, it gets really tiring because it's like, oh, Tomo says that he wants to know why you drew the inkle with the pointed hat." And then he says something, and it's like one 10-second comment takes like 5 minutes, and it just go on. And they're begging me to go with them. I go, no. I've been there. I've done it. It's just too tiring. So he called me up the next day, goes, "Oh, you are so right." It's tiring. But I will say this, at Mobius's funeral, at the because he really loved Otomo. And one of the last books at his bedside where he died was the new Kaba book that he had done. And at the gravesite, at the head of it, there were 2 bouquets of flowers. And one was from Otomo, who couldn't be there because he had that huge Akira display that he had to take care of. And then the other was Miyazaki, who was finishing, I think it was The Wind Also Rises. So because they were very close, all those guys.
Yeah,
I let him know because through a third party that that he had received their flowers.
Yeah, it's super cool. You see their sphere of influence with those guys when you see enough of their body of work. Certainly, Nausicaa and Otomo has his moments, man. Even in Robot Carnival, like if you see that opening piece of Robot Carnival, it has a lot of Mobius vibes to it.
Otomo was going to do a Jodorowsky story. And Jodorowsky had written this thing for him, and Otomo had agreed to do it as a comic. And I remember at that time thinking, he's not going to do Otomo's. It was like 400 some pages. And I know how Alejandro can be. And like, he says it's 400 pages, but it'll end up being like 1,200 because he will like, I don't think I can, that's why I've never worked with him, is because he's just one book, Darrow, just one book. It'll never be just one book. And he was always after Mobius to do everything. And Mobius would they said, Darrow, I don't understand. I have Otomo wants to work with me. I have Mobius and Book, and you always say no. I go, well, maybe next year. But because I like him. He's a real character, but it's never just one book. And I don't know that I could, keep it going for 4 books.
Did you ever feast your eyes on that Dune Bible that Mobius drew and all those guys? You seen it?
Yep. I mean, at Jodorowsky's house. I mean, the thing with that book is like, and because they never returned Mobius's drawings, and they should have. And his wife sued and won, but the guy still hasn't turned him over. And so that's why that whole thing is not being printed, is because there's that big fight going on between that, I can't remember what the producer's name was. They talk about him in that documentary. I mean, a lot of what they were going to do ended up in the Inkle anyway. It was like, if you see the storyboards, there's like, I remember that sequence from the Dune book. But yeah.
Just when you see that book in the documentary, and they're proffering this like hardcover like thing like this, it has to be 1,500, 2,000 pages worth of artwork.
They didn't have that much on the Matrix, but that's what they did with the Matrix, because they could not grasp what that thing was about. The head of Warner Brothers could not wrap it. That's why they brought Steve and me and a guy named Colin Grant and Tani Catano, who's a really beautiful artist, to visualize this stuff. And Warner said it was the most impressive presentation they'd ever seen. And the only reason that film got made was because you have to have a star. And they had at one point, maybe you heard this story, it was going to be Duchovny. He wanted to do it, but he said, well, I'll do this if I don't do this X-Files movie, because he was super hot. And in fact, when I drew that, I did an early version of the bullet time thing. I drew him, and he kind of looked like, I drew him as Neo as Duchovny. But that didn't boil out. So then they had, Leonardo DiCaprio came in, and he said he'd just finished doing the Titanic, and I guess it was a horrendous experience. And he said, I can't do another visual effects picture. His dad's a big comic book guy. Yeah,
George, man. There's a documentary on Netflix about Zukalski, this artist Zukalski, and George DiCaprio's all over that thing. Yeah. There's also Rhino Video. Years ago, they put out this Robert Williams documentary. Man, that's really, really good, and gets deep into the underground stuff. And you sort of see George DiCaprio on there talking about like, we chose Leonardo's stage name after some Robert Williams, Leo something or other.
Yeah, maybe we heard this story. Like I was at San Diego, and I'm sitting there, and there's Gaston, who used to run this great comic book store called Meltdown.
Oh yeah,
wonderful place. And he's got this kid with him, and this kid wants to buy artwork, and he's looking at this stuff, and he's I want to buy this. And they kept talking, and he kind of talked what I thought of, and he was like a hip hop guy. These terms, I don't know what they were, and he kept talking about the cheese. I got to buy the cheese, and you think this is, and he's picking up these drawings of mine, and he's going, yeah, what do you think this is, the cheese? And I went, I don't know, it could be gorgonzola. It depends on your taste. And I didn't know who this guy is. He's wearing sunglasses, and we're talking. We keep going back and forth, and I'm kind of giving him a hard time. And at one point, Gaston says, he says, well, you got to treat him right, because after what Sam did with that, the Quick and the Dead, which Leonardo was in, and there's a scene in the Quick and the Dead where Gene Hackman shoots the black gunfighter and blows a hole in his head, and you can see through the hole in the head, and you see and that's the shot out of Hard Boiled. And I know it's a shot out of Hard Boiled because I was invited to a party at Sam Raimi's house. They invited me over when they were doing this John Woo movie, and John Woo was there too, and Bruce Campbell and Sam, and I gave each one of them the front and the back cover of Hard Boiled with the hole blown through it. So he put it in the movie, and like Leonardo was like, oh yeah, and I remember shooting good head myself, and I realized, fuck, he kind of looks like, oh shit, it's Leonardo DiCaprio, and he's I guess he'd come down there to see. He came to see me, and he went to see Mobius and to buy artwork from us. And I remember he buys this artwork from me, and he writes me a check, and he gives me a check, and I take the check, and I said, can I see an ID? And he just kind of went red, and I was like, I'm kidding.
That's so good, man. That Gaston guy, he's got to have a million stories, man. He told me about hooking Kanye West up with Simon Bisley, and Kanye will like go visit Simon Bisley at some castle whenever he goes across the pond.
Wow. Yeah, I don't know what he ever did, because actually he bought from me this double page spread, because I'd had that the first Shaolin Cowboy with me, some of the artwork. And it was a big drawing of this dinosaur with a city on the back of it. And he wanted that. And I sold it to him because it was Leonardo. And I didn't have a copy of it. So I had to go back and ink it again. And that was painful because it was huge.
Oh,
So yeah. But, yeah.
Makes me wonder what his art collection's like, because he was on Marin and he was talking about having like crumb art and stuff.
you see him at shows, like he's always at that like hey Jesus de la blah, 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 whatever the heck
Yeah.
that place is called.
Because I heard he moved on and he was getting, I don't know, modern art, and maybe, I don't know. But yeah, I actually ran into him again in a Virgin Records on Sunset, because I'm in the room and I'm in the place and I was looking at records, and I just get that feeling someone's staring at me. I look around and there he is, and he's like leaning up against, and then he looks away. And I go, oh, it's Leonardo. And I go and say something to him. I go, so then I'm looking at him and I don't feel uncomfortable because I'm looking at him and I couldn't, he's not going to remember me. Probably haven't answered any of your questions. You always ask good technical questions. Not that I have any good technical answers. But.
I do have one that's kind of a weird one. The first Shaolin Cowboy series that Burly Man published, there's a credit in there for color and letter, Peter Doherty.
Yeah.
What do you remember about him? I really liked his color work on that series. I thought it looked really great, but also like color or letter is a credit that you don't often see the same person having on a book. So anything about him you remember?
Well, because he wanted to do the lettering. And so I just did. I mean, he was really super talented, can really draw. And he wanted to do it. And I remember telling him, man, it's a waste of your time. You should be drawing. Because he spent a lot of time. And one of the reasons he didn't do the others is he started doing the second one. And I had to let him go because I said, Peter, you can't take more time to color this than it takes me to draw it. I mean, it's not, and that was like on the Burly Man stuff, they were not very happy because he was getting paid a fair amount of money and he just wasn't delivering. And to this day, I mean, we kind of exchange words because I can't count on him. And on top of it, he said, you shouldn't be doing, you should be drawing. Because he does. He's done some Judge Dredd stories and he's really good. But I don't know what it is about him, the lack of confidence, or else he spends a lot of time on social media, it seems like to me. Maybe that's what eats up his time. But so, he wanted to do the lettering. And I said, yeah, that's fine. And but it took, that book was done for a while, just waiting for him to get, because he would like, go out and take pictures of meat and stuff to make sure when something was cut, it was the right color and textures on rocks. And I was like, oh man. And there wasn't some of the stuff that I asked him to do, he didn't do, but once again, it's like, it took so long that I just kind of, and I really like what he did. I mean, he didn't do the whole series. He only did a few issues. We finally had to bring some other people in to get it done. We brought in Alex Wald, in the last one, and Laverne, I never pronounce his name, Kedrzinski, who quit on me, which really made me angry because like he wanted to do it, and I said, this is a lot of work, and he did one issue and then he quit it, and I was not. So one of those things, if you're going to quit something, you better call the person up and tell them you're quitting. You don't pass by an intermediary, at least as far as I'm concerned. And he just kind of buried the hatchet because, but I don't know.
Geof, what do you use to ink? Pen wise, what's your go-to ink? Is that the Micron?
Yeah, I have like from 0.001. Now they have 0.003.
Yeah, they do.
And I use 0.005 a lot. 0, 3, and 8 quite a bit. And sometimes I use one, they have like just a number 1, which has kind of a, it's kind of a, they're nylon tips, and if you, here's one. It has a kind of a, oh my God, there it is. it gets kind of soft, almost a little brush like. I mean, anyway, do you think my inking's okay? Do you think it's okay? I don't know.
Are you kidding?
No, I'm not, because I've been working on this thing. It's like 205 pages, and I always think I'll draw, like one issue, and then I'll ink it, and I'll move on to the next one. But I get into that drawing groove, and I think it's going okay. I'll just go a little bit further, and then before I know it, and then I got like 100 some pages into it, and I'm thinking. Then the COVID hit. I kept thinking, what if I die? If I can finish this thing in pencil, because when you see my pencils are really tight. I think you could probably print from the pencils. I said that if I can get it, pencil, because I mean, almost anybody could add the dialogue at this point, because it's just, for me, it's just guys fighting and stuff. And this one has a little bit more of a political thing going on it, but so I finished the thing, right? 205 pages. COVID hasn't killed me yet, and although I'm vaccinated and everything, but I live in the middle of nowhere. But so then I go, now I got to ink that thing. And my God, it's been like, I keep thinking it's shit. I have to hide it. I've got it hidden, And when I at night when I turn off, because if you can see, here's I don't know if you can see. Can you see?
Oh yeah.
I'm inking that page, and I have to turn the light off and not look at it. And leave the room because I just think, because it's not finished, so I think it just looks horrible. And I got to get to that point where, and then when I get it done, I take it and I put it in a drawer and I don't look at it. And I'm supposed to send another issue off to Dark Horse, but I know I have to look at it before I send it. I have to steel up my courage to get it.
That's interesting to revisit it like that. Like I'll often, I'll have my pile of pages from whatever, and then when I go back and revisit them months later, it's almost like they're always different than I remember them.
And I can't remember. I just vaguely remember something like, I'm kind of excited. I go, well, when I finish this page, I wonder what's on the next page. I know he's fighting something, but what is it? And I go, oh, it's that drawing. Because I don't remember. In fact, I don't even remember this. If you guys do this, the stuff the dialogue that I write, I don't remember writing most of it. Sometimes I could read them and go, wow, that's kind of funny. I wonder if maybe they got someone to rewrite this thing and tell me. I don't remember writing it. Because I don't know if the dialogue's any good or anything. I mean, it's just what it is.
Comics is always so comedic in that way too, where it's like, it's like a cartoon where here's the to-do pile, and then here's like what you're working on. It's like one thing, put it in this pile over here, 2 pages, deep. And then you have 250 pages to go. It's masochistic.
You did that, like I can remember when I did the first page, and the first page I have to draw is like this horrendous down shot of a city, because I thought, you got to set the scene, and God damn, it's like, okay, now I only have 204 left. 203, and I go, once I get under 200, I'll feel like I got some rhythm. And it was always like, if I get down to 190, I'll feel better. And now I've got 34 pages left to ink, because it starts coming out in March. It's the longest thing. Well, it's the longest thing I've ever done.
The other masochistic piece, now I think about it, is like, you take a look at the accomplishment, the final printed book. And I don't know about either of you guys, man, but I always have this feeling of like, I lived through it. I don't have to do this one again. Like it's done. It's over. I'm glad I lived through it. I see like how I spent my days, and I remember what went on during that time. But then I'm just going back to the board, working on the next thing. I'm doing the same thing. It's just like there's some mental trick where I just feel like, I'm so glad that's behind me. And then it's like, behind me is my drawing table, and I'm going to go there after we're done recording.
I always say that with like a book release or whatever. Like that's not the important day when the new book comes out. It's those 250 days of drawing. It's the life led at the drawing table. Like figure out that part, get that part right, because the book release is one day.
Right? Yeah. That's the shit that like directors always talk about. Like making the movie fucking sucks, man. Like you're waking up, you're getting 4 hours of sleep, if that. Man, the press release and like you know, the opening parties and stuff, the galas, the festival circuit. Like that's the fun. Everything that's not making the movie is the fun stuff.
And then you get the question that crushes your soul, like, when's the next one?
What's
coming?
next?
What are you working on next?
Let this one set just a little while longer.
You know, like I've become so comfortable with that because like what's the opposite, right? Like the person isn't curious and like, you know, definitely don't want that, man. So I've grown to accept that thing and just like take that as a compliment, man, because what would life be if somebody wasn't looking forward to the next thing, you know?
Well, I mean, even if sometimes it's just two from editors, they'll sit there and they go like, you know, oh, you know, we were afraid to call you up and ask you to do a cover because you know. I said, if you call somebody up and you offer a job to them and they treat you like shit, you should never talk to them again because they should just be. I mean, it's flattering to be asked to do something. I mean, the beginning, I would never get asked. I did some covers that I had no interest in doing, but they asked, and nobody ever. You know, I didn't get because I don't think I'm a very good cover artist because I always want to draw the thing that like those Marvel covers I've done. I've never, except for maybe I did one New Mutants with a bulldog on the cover that I never draw like what I call an iconic thing, you know, that I don't do that iconic pose. I don't think, you know, the guy, you know, like jumping through that you see on Marvel and they're great, but I can't, you know, I don't think I'm good at it. So I'll always draw like I'll bury the character in a building or he's jumping off a building, or I did a Wolverine cover where he's like this big, he's fighting all these ninjas in Tokyo. And, you know, like people, you couldn't tell it's a Wolverine cover unless you point out, see, there's the Wolverine. Oh, so I just don't think I'm very good at that. So I'm always amazed by, you know, like well, when you guys do, like I was just doing your covers, I was like, how do I do something that I can't? Oh, no one wants to see me draw someone just standing there. I don't think. So I gotta keep something. So like, what if you know he's in the garage? And I hope you didn't mind that I didn't draw because I didn't think I could draw one of your characters and do you justice. So I mean, originally I was asking you, but I hated this. I go, oh, what if maybe I could put the Shaolin cowboy in there because I hate serial killers. I just want to see.
Listen, Uncle Jeff, I owe you some foie gras or something, man. Thanks for doing that cover, man. Next time I'm in France, or I see you at a show.
Well, I got to tell you something. Don't put this on the air.
Okay, but I'm going to have that part on the air just so that everybody's like, what did he say?
Okay, you can. Some guy contacts me on Facebook and he says, "Have you seen this? Holy shit!"
Yeah,
like that really kind of like. And I just like, I don't know if it's something that it's not something to brag about, but it's like, there you go, those are my fans.
You know, and then you moved to rural France.
Yeah. Well, you know, when I moved to, because I've lived in New York, I've lived in Chicago, lived in Tokyo for a year, and Los Angeles. But I moved to rural France, not here, but Normandy, which is almost the same thing, and we were friends with most of the neighbors. It's like really, I'm out in the middle of nowhere. And we knew this neighbor lady, and she lived there with her son, and she had the family caretaker who took care of their farm. And I remember waking up in the middle of the night because I heard what I thought was a car backfiring. And the next day, I'm out with my wife, we're driving, we go by their house, and there's all these cop cars. And it turns out that the caretaker had secretly, and maybe even had abused her, had been in love with this woman who's living there with her child. She's the owner, her parents are dead, and she lives in this farm now. And they kept the caretaker on to take care of the thing. And she was dating this guy. She was divorced, and she finally meets this guy that she's in love with. And the caretaker would take it. And when she came home, he's waiting for her with a shotgun, and he blows her in half. And then he blows his own brains out. So I'm thinking, oh my God, I live in all these big cities, and I go to France, and this turns out this little town, there's like 2 or 3 stories of like one guy, his parents, his dad remarried with a hooker, and the son fell in love with a hooker, and she turned him away. So he killed his dad and this hooker, and then he's running around in the cornfields with a shotgun. There's like 3 or 4 murders in this little town. I go, fuck me, man. Anyway,
Jeez.
I'll send you that if you want to see it. I'll send you that.
Yeah, definitely. I got to see that thing, man.
I remember in France after I remember when Columbine came out, and my editor says, you know, do you feel bad about this? Because that's the kind of stuff you draw what they did. And I said, you know, that's not fair.
Oh, they were looking for answers everywhere, man.
Oh, yeah, well, I remember because I was on that this a little while later. I worked on the Matrix, and I was on a press junket with them because we're very close. And I always kind of thought of myself, you know, like a racehorse, they'll put like a goat or a small animal with a racehorse. It keeps them calm before the race. Well, that's how I was with them, because I joke around with them, and they're always they said, they're a lot more talkative and happy when you're around. So would you come? And so they're in Paris. And so they're doing these interviews, and I'm sitting between the two of them. And the question they keep getting asked was about there had been a massacre, and they were being blamed. They said, do you feel responsible for that maybe there was Columbine, the other one was another massacre, but do you feel responsible for that massacre? Because they were wearing the long coats, and they had the machine guns, and they kind of looked like they were out of the Matrix. And they're really smart. And they said, let me ask you a question. If you could pick one book, do you feel like you should be able to make movies like this? So if you could pick one book that you know is responsible for the death of millions, would you ban that book? And they said, well, what book would that be? And they said, the Bible. And then people get shut down. They don't want to hear that shit, but it's true. Walmart didn't want the DVD or the video cassette, whatever it was at the time, that cover with them standing there with the machine guns, because of that whole thing. They thought that they would, but you can buy those same fucking guns in Walmart.
Yeah, get some buckshots and shit.
They're willing to sell it, but not that. They said they wouldn't handle that DVD or video cassette if it had that cover.
Geof, I wonder about your process. You showed us the light table and inking over your pencils on pages. Have you always worked that way?
Yeah, because I found that if you look, I'll put this up really close. If you look at it, it's really dark, and I draw so hard that it actually almost is kind of engraved. It's kind of like Braille almost. And if I ink directly on the pencil, it comes out kind of gray, because there's so much graphite there that it doesn't lay down as black as I'd want it to. So I kind of started doing it on my first French thing, and I really took off for me was when I worked on the City of Fire with Mobius. I did these pencil drawings, and he felt the same way. So he got this. It's not exactly Mylar, but it's a paper plastic kind of. There's more of a tooth to it. It's called Opalux, and because if you put another sheet of a Strathmore over Strathmore that I use, he can barely see it. So he used that, and he would ink it on a light box, and then I started doing it that way. And in fact, I used Opalux for the longest time, but I'm always afraid, because I actually gave an original to Frank, and I'd go to his office, and he just had it kind of laying on a table underneath near a window. And it's his. I didn't say anything, but by the time it was getting yellower and brittler and browner, and I'm sure it just fell apart. And so I was always worried that stuff will, if you expose it to light, it'll fall apart.
Not archival materials.
It makes sense. Yeah, it makes sense to use a fresh sheet when you're inking with Micron anyhow, because you erase over top of that. Like half the Micron ink goes away.
It'll go away. Yeah, So the Micron, I don't even know how I started using Microns. I remember Gil Kane used to use flares, and I have a couple of his originals, and that stuff turns like that weird red brown.
Yeah,
and then God only knows what they'll be like.
We've seen those Toth pages
I
are
was
like
going to
purple.
say, yeah, I think
Yeah,
Toth would experiment with all kinds of pens and markers and things, and that stuff looks crazy after not
But I
very
have,
long.
I have no idea how funny, because I tried rapidographs, but they always used to have to go like this all day, click, 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 and they would blot up, and you can't. It's a metal tip, and I'd always end up like building up paper on the end of it because I'd be like, I'm like a caveman. But with these micron things, they just, but I go through them like crazy because the tip gets a little.
This is a little bit esoteric, but I do a little bit of stuff on light tables, and it always bothers my eyes. Do you have any tricks for, like, my eyes dry out, I think, from staring at the light box?
It worries me because I actually had a problem. I had like I guess it happens when you're myopic. Like the retina, it's not a detached retina, but it tears, and they have to kind of like glue it back, not glue it down, but that happened to me. Gosh, it was several years ago, and that was kind of frightening.
That's the scariest thing I can imagine.
If you ever see, if you close your eyes and you kind of think that you're seeing like little lightning bolts and they don't go away, go to an eye guy, because they can fix it really fast, but you don't want it because then the retina can detach. But yeah, not really. I mean, like knock on wood, haven't got that metacarpal thing either, and a lot of people have trouble with it. I don't know, because God, I'm drawn. I'm like, I'm like a caveman.
It's really cool the mileage you get out of those microns, because I'm looking at like feathered edges and things like that. So you must have like a real.
Well, they get kind of soft, and you can kind of. It's really weird because I look at sometimes I'm looking at these things, and I know it's kind of shattered, but I know if I turn it a certain way, I can still get the proper edge. And every once in a while I think about it, I go, how did I ever develop that sort of, you just feel it in your fingers because you've used it so much. Because what do you guys do? You guys are real artists. You guys like
right.
brushes and stuff.
Like, right? Have you ever tried the Copic fine liners?
No, I have one here, but what do they like?
They're really nice, man, and the ink is blacker, and also it just it has a more the tactility on the paper just feels more sensual.
You just have those size nibs on the end, or
yeah, same deal. From the sets I have from 0.01 to 1.0.
Maybe I'll try that. Because you do worry sometimes. I think sometimes these lines look gray, and I don't know. Because I'll constantly because I think, oh, my ink is so shit, and I'll pull out one of the old books and look at it. Yeah, it looks okay, I guess.
Yeah,
I mean, because Dave Stevens, because I love when you guys talked with Jaime Hernandez, because Dave, I kind of met them through him. They probably don't remember me, but although I remember Gilbert said to me once, he said, you're to violence what I am to sex. But Dave was always trying to get Jaime to use a brush, because that's the only way to really to do comics is with a brush. Which I was like, well, come on. I mean, there's no right or wrong about anything, I don't think. But we tried getting him in Jaime's like, come on, look at what he does. I mean, why break something that isn't broken? I mean, fix something that isn't broken. I mean,
it feels like such a lost art, inking with the brush.
Yeah. And Dave Stevens, holy cow, that guy. I mean, there's something about him. I mean, going over to his house and his apartment, and he's working on this Jungle Girl cover. She's on this limb, and there's a parrot, and the drawing is partly penciled, partly inked, and there's this wrist, and the hand is inked. This part is penciled, that's ink, but there's like a whole empty space here. There's no blue line, there's nothing. And I said, Dave, how do you know? Because he can see it in his head. I mean, how do you know that the proportion is going to be right? And because he was always like, oh, I'm trying to find some reference of like a turn of an ankle or a turn of some photo that he would find in one of his, because he would collect old glamour magazines. And it's like, oh my God, I mean, that feather, that he'd feather that thing. And I remember Mike Kaluta would stay with him out in California. And I guess I was curious because I never knew what Dave was doing, because, I didn't know how he survived. But I said, so Mike, what did you see, Dave? What was he doing all? He goes, how much did he get done? Because he was trying to finish the Rocketeer. And he said, well, he said, when I got there, he was working on this fedora. When I left, he finished that fedora, but it was a hell of a hat. that was Dave. He always told me, he said, I'm not going to do a lot of comics, but the ones I do, I want them to be quality. And he did. I worked on one of them. I did a background on the last one. He took out, because he's in a tenement and he's flying up these stairs. He says, oh, can you do so I did the backgrounds of these like staircases, and I had rats running around and garbage and this and that, and it all disappeared. Much clutter for Dave. Go to the tenement, for God's sake. There's going to be rats and there's going to be bottles and garbage. And
Jimmy, this is a heck of a conversation. Jeff, I thank you so much for your time, man. Now, the stuff that you're sending off to Dark Horse, that's a Shaolin Cowboy miniseries?
I'm sitting back here. They're still in the tubes.
Is there a projected date that this is going to see the light of day?
Yeah, the first issue comes out in March of next year. It's called Shaolin Cowboy. There's going to be 7 issues, and the title of this one is Cruel to Be Kin.
That's excellent, man. What if, when that thing comes out, before final order cutoff, something like that, maybe we pick up the conversation again and promote that thing? That would
be very kind and generous on your part, because I like that comic. I like doing it. And, I make money off it. They don't lose money, which surprises the heck out of me every time. They're not, but because I'm like you guys. I like to do comics. That's what I want to do. And whenever I've worked in movies, it's always been so that it's like a revenue source. I worked on the Matrix movies mostly because, well, they were, I didn't know who they were at the time, and I liked the script, and I thought, well, I can make, you make a certain amount of money and you go off, and it allowed me, because after that, that's when I came up with I was going to do this. Originally, I was going to do it was Doc Frankenstein. That was what my comic was. I was going to do. Then I got, I don't know, there's enough superheroes, and I've been started watching more Asian films, and I go, I'm gonna do. And I like westerns, so I like Sergio Leone and all those crazy spaghetti westerns. So I don't know if I can mix the two of them together. But I didn't figure I could call him Bourbon Thread anymore, because it doesn't make any sense. But even that name is from a Japanese. Because I think Japan will put words together, they don't mean anything. And I thought Bourbon Thread, it just sounded funny to me. But Shaolin Cowboy, now that sounds like a funny idea. So that's my Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles title. I think it's the greatest comic book title of all time.
That title sold that comic. We had no frame of reference, and you see Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, in Comic Buyer's Guide. There's iambic pentameter to the flow of the title.
There's so much going on there. I remember I was at Hanna-Barbera, and they're talking about these guys at Disney are talking about this comic called Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Like, what the hell is that? Jesus. Just it creates so many images in your head.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Jeff, I know it's getting late there in France. We don't want to take up much more of your time. You're very generous with your time, and we appreciate it a whole lot. I do have to say, we haven't had a phone conversation for a while. I don't know if you found some new shiny toy.
No, like I say, I'm afraid you're gonna go, oh no, he's calling. The same with you, Jim. Because we talked for 2 hours. I go, these guys are gonna be this guy's just a pain in the ass. Because I'll talk, and I was just here because I just wish I could show you my comics, because I really would like to know what you think. But
it's
I'm here in the middle of nowhere, and nobody cares. I've got some friends here because they're farmers, and they look at me like I'm from another planet, and I like these guys, but
I want to hit those bookshelves right there, real bad.
They're just so. But it's so funny, because I got a dairy farmer, down the road here, and I talked to him, he goes, "What do you do?" And I always figure, well, if I tell them about the Matrix, at least that, they don't even know what the Matrix is. So I was like, they got no point of reference for me. It's just this goofy guy, and they come in here, and I don't know if you move the thing or you can see.
Oh, that's fucking awesome.
Here's my. Tell me to stop if you want, but. Well, DVDs and toys. And if you look here, you see this? That's that system that I had for putting for the perspective. Oh,
That is so cool, man.
That is
I need
amazing.
to try to figure out how to hook something all
It
together.
reminds me of like Dave Cooper had that setup that his dad had built so he could paint and be, in whatever comfortable position. It's really neat.
On Man Bend, Junji Ito creates his own tools to just, it's like a NASCAR pit crew. He just shaves a couple of seconds off of his process, compound that with 500-page stories, and you're saving Earth months.
Hey, can you see me? Because I lost your image. I don't know if you can see.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we could see you.
Oh, okay. Well, for some reason I don't. Oh, there you are. Yeah, that Man Bend thing. My God. And there's another guy. And I've heard stories about Oda too, the One Piece, because I mean, that guy's got so much money, and he could just quit. But he keeps doing it. I'm so admirative of those guys, because that's what he wants. They're passionate about it. Hope it doesn't kill him. I mean, that
it always does. Like,
I mean,
mangaka just do not live to be 70. Even.
Well, the guy Sanpei Shirato, the guy that did Kamui, he's still alive. He's living on some island and he fishes.
That's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, but a lot of, I mean, Otomo. I mean, I can't. I guess he's my age, but he gave up. I mean, he makes films, but he, I think I don't know how that guy went back and finished Akira, because after doing that movie, it's like, man, how do you go back and finish something that you've already finished?
It's one of the most fascinating phenomena I can imagine in pop culture, because he did a quarter, close to half of that book, in manga form.
Yeah.
And in the film, he's able to give that part a second draft. And it's in a lot of ways tighter in the film, like we could have that conversation, but then he has to dream up that ending for the film. And that's kind of Byzantine and like it's whatever. Yeah. So the second pass for that is the manga. Like you can't point to something else that works like that in pop culture. There's nothing that comes to mind where you get two chances, but like with two different media to complete your story.
Yeah, and the two halves that are the drafts like flip.
They do, yeah. Like the ending of the manga is like, first off, you get to see Akira. Like, talk about a cock tease, right? Like, you're gonna show me some eyeballs. You're gonna call this thing Akira. Like, that's why everybody thinks Kaneda's Akira, man. Because it's like, what? You're just gonna show me a little brain and some eyeballs? That's Akira? Like, that's not very satisfying.
He always talks about how he did it all by himself, which is impossible.
It's bollocks.
I talked to a guy, I met a guy from Japan. He came and he was a mangaka, and he told me he worked as an assistant on it, because I mean, there's no you're not throwing any shade on him by saying that, because just drawing the lines on those buildings, for Christ's sake. And I know from just, God,
you would know. You would know. Absolutely. You're the guy.
And laying that craft tint and all that stuff on it. It's just, come on, man. I mean, there's no shame in it. It's like, my God, just doing the storyboards for that thing are mind-boggling, if you ask me. But,
yeah. And I think he did do the storyboards. Like, I think that is all him. And he's light boxing some of the manga backgrounds and stuff like that to shave a little time or whatever. But you take a look at that Akira Club book, and it has all of the title pages for all the chapters. And then
I had all those because I subscribed to the Japanese bookstore, and I'd go and buy it every week.
So when it was being serialized.
Yeah. Because I was just, holy cow, because I was just because I happened to, because in those days I just go into a store and I pull things out, because I couldn't read Japanese, and I just pull them out of the shelf and look at him. And I came across the one that he did. The first one I came was the Chinese, the Russian-Chinese War. I don't know what the title is. It's never been printed for whatever reason in the United States. It's fantastic. That thing influenced me so much. And because
that's the one you brought back.
Yeah, it's and mine is so broken up. from looking at the spine is broken. I remember that's the one I showed to Mobius, and he had never heard, he didn't know who he was. And then the next one was Domu, is that how you say it?
Yeah.
And I remember he borrowed that one, for he never gave it back to me. I mean, I just went and got another, but yeah, and just like, wow. And then when I don't know how I found out that Akira was coming out, but I, went down there, I subscribed, and every week I'd go and pick that thing in Young Magazine, and I couldn't keep all of them because there's just so much paper after a while, but I always made sure I kept all those titles. So when the club thing came out, that was, I didn't even know that, because I never bothered. Actually, I was watching you're talking about it, and I didn't know that they had translated it into English.
Yeah, that's the reason to buy that new box set. I think actually Dark Horse, I think did the original printing.
Yeah, I looked and it was like they went like $150 for it. I was like, oh man,
might as well get the box set.
Well,
yeah,
I already had it, and I just have never opened it. Well, because it always bothered. I don't know how you guys felt about it, but and I'm not gonna put, because I like Steve Oliff, but I didn't want to see it in color. It doesn't need color for me. It's just, I don't need it, and I think it covers up some of what he did. But so it's.
I mean, there's whole parts like if you take a look at the Tetsuo big fetus thing that happens, it's completely almost like a surprint, computer colored over top of the actual line art. It doesn't look like it's not really Otomo's illustration. You're looking more at what Steve Oliff's doing, and that was that weird period. It's like pre-Photoshop where it's like some weird vector, lens flare thing. I maybe you'll be able to solve this because you were in on it from the jump, and you were around, and maybe you would know what some of the technology was when we were having the conversation about those early Akiras. And there's that painting that is the cover of the very first chapter. Right. And it's like, it's dubious. You don't know if it's Kaneda or Akira, and he doesn't know. Like, he just kind of, it was more an idea. And it's pixelated. It's like a mosaic. And then there's the Neo Tokyo map from the sky. And in the Tonkobon, it's kind of like a beautiful painting. But in that first magazine, it's a mosaic image, but it's clearly from the painting. So how the fuck does a guy in 1982 get that mosaic into print form?
I don't know. I could find out. I could ask somebody.
I'm so curious. Like if you that is a question I've been trying to solve for a while now, man. Because like there would be those manga where he would experiment with, I don't know, shooting a piece of art on a camcorder and then taking a photo of the screen of the television screen so that he could have that interlace, and that would be published in the books. And there were some Tetsuo images that were like that, but nothing with this precise digital mosaic.
Well, I'll ask somebody that I know that knows him, if they see him, because they go to the same bars. I mean, I remember one time when I was there. You know who Mike Arias is?
No.
He directed Tekkon Kinkrita.
Oh wow!
Which is a beautiful fucking cartoon, and he's like a computer guy. I mean, he was working on the Animatrix, and he was like producing it, and I didn't really know who he was really, and because I managed to get to go to every press junket for the Matrix to Japan because I just wanted to go to Tokyo, and I got to go first class and stay in the best hotels because I paid for all that shit. And at one point, Joel Silver gave me his chauffeured car. And I was being chauffeured around to this guy, and the guy was like, the day before he told me he had like the Prime Minister of Canada, and now he's driving this goofy guy from Iowa. It was like, come on, we're going to Nakano Broadway. And he's like, I was in Shinjuku staying in this cheap hotel, and he goes, I have never been to this part of town. But it was weird on the mouth, but anyway, Mike Arias. So I didn't know who this guy was. He said, I want to do this animated film. He can't draw. And I go, how does a guy that can't draw do an animated film? And he did it. It is so beautiful. He'd like cut out pictures. He took pictures of certain buildings, and he worked with Koji Morimoto, I think, who did all the backgrounds, just beautiful backgrounds at Studio, I think it was Studio 4C, I think it was. But yeah, that thing, and he knows Otomo. And Otomo like one of his, she worked with him. I don't know if she worked with him as an assistant on some of his films, but she developed a cancer and then she survived. And he bought her a bar because she couldn't work anymore, which is really cool. It's one of those bars, you know, Ed, it's like 10 people at the most,
Sure.
I was in this down, and we go in there, and then, you know, he generally shows up there at night to have a drink there. And
that's the one piece that I just couldn't make happen when I was out there. Like we tried 2 times, man. And that was probably going to be the bar we were supposed to go to, man. And he got called away for 2 things because they were about to put together that Art of Wall exhibit that sort of released, like, you know, the week after I split or something. But you know what, like, to bring up the assistant thing, the reason I brought up Akira Club is because when you look at the title pages, if you remember in Young Magazine, there'd be a little paragraph that would be like an autobiographical statement that the mangaka would have in relation to their strip. And it would be non sequitur, have nothing to do with the strip. But there are several of those pieces where he's just saying something like breaking in a new assistant, or I got a new assistant. So he clearly had assistants. It's just like when it all comes out, like, for whatever reason, man, he would say, you know, I had 2 guys or whatever. And it's like, I don't know, man. Big facility.
It makes me remember, because when I was over there working on my aborted film, the Wachowskis had come over, and we were going to meet, and we were going to Kyoto because there's a super animator there that never does anything. But the producer talked him into animating certain sections. They call them cuts. They don't call them scenes. He does only 12 cuts a year, and he's agreed to do it on this film just because we were going to see him, and this crazy gaijin wants him to do it. But at the same time, oddly enough, in Kyoto, Mobius was going to be there to do a symposium with Otomo. And so we all meet, and I'm in this room, and I go, holy shit, you got the Wachowskis, you had Otomo, you had this director Rentaro who did Metropolis, you had like 2 other, Koji Morimoto, and there's all these incredible guys in one room. I think, geez, if a bomb hit this place, it'd be like, you know, a huge. But I can see, I remember Otomo's face because I walk into the room and he's busy talking to Mobius. Mobius, he goes, oh, and he jumps up and he runs across the room to hug me. And Otomo's like, oh, you know, who's this guy? So he keeps talking to me, and Mobius is so funny because he starts talking about, he loved that Metropolis movie. He goes, oh, I wish I could meet Rentaro. And I go, that's him right across the table from you. Anyway, I digressed into a crazy story. That was the way he was. He was just, but yeah, it was a funny, I'll find a picture. I'll send you a picture of Otomo and the Wachowskis, and yeah, it's funny. But,
Geof, can you talk about your animated feature? Is that something that you can or want to talk about?
Yeah,
how far that went? What happened with it?
That was like, yeah. It didn't get finished because originally it was going to be a Japanese, because the Animatrix made so much money that the studio Madhouse had wanted to do another film, and they contacted the Wachowskis, and they thought that Shaolin would make a good movie. And they said, hey, do you want to direct it? And I was like, I don't know. I said, I don't know if I can. I said, do you think I can? Because I'd been asked to direct stuff after The Matrix for some ungodly reason. You know how Hollywood is. They're like, and they'd call me and go, we'd like you to work on this. We'd like you to direct this movie. And I go, I'm not a director. I don't know how to direct a film. And like the Wachowski goes, you're crazy, man. Don't ever say no, because we can tell you everything you need to know in 20 minutes. But I'm still like, anyway. But so they said yes. So I said, yeah. So I wrote the script, and then they liked it, and they got half the money was supposed to be put up by the Weinsteins. And it was like in 2008, and there was the crash, and the Weinsteins had already overextended. They got into fashion and all this stuff, and they were losing money, hemorrhaging. And they basically agreed to do Shaolin because they wanted to get in business with the Wachowskis. And they thought they only had to put up like $3 million. They thought $3 million, that's nothing. It's like a calling card to get into business with them. But they never, ever even got together. And when push came to shove, they had to cut loose stuff. They cut loose that thing. And so I'm over in Japan, and I can't tell the Japanese who are still producing this thing. And I'm thinking they're losing money because and they're desperately trying to find the financing, the Wachowskis. And Speed Racer had not done well at all. So they're, you know, how that affects your cachet in Hollywood. You're only as good as your last hit. And they couldn't find the money because they couldn't put their thumb on what it was, because it's not for kids, kind of, and it's not, you know, such a crazy thing. But so anyway, but I was over there for about altogether about a year, and Steve Scrose came over at one point to help me storyboard it. But the whole thing was storyboarded. But the way they do it in Japan is it was almost half finished when they finally gave up. But they don't do it linear. There's no linear way about it. They'll do like, well, I'll do part of this scene, but they're waiting for this animator who's really good at doing guns to finish that. And and then there's this guy who's an expert on drawing dust. And they don't do pencil tests unless you pay them to it, because you animate it and you shoot it. And if it doesn't work, then they fix it. But they don't do pencil tests. So there's some layouts, some key animation, some partially full animation. And I was equated to like a house that has the couch, some of the plumbing, some of the staircase, some of the walls, and some of the electricity. If you put it all together, it'd make 40% of a house, but it's not going to look like a house. And that film I've got little bits of it. If I had it, I could film it and send it to you if you're interested in seeing it. They managed to talk him into doing a little, to try to sell it. And there's one of the guys that did a sequence was this, did you ever see Mind Games?
No.
Oh, this he's like this crazy, just amazing animator. And the whole idea was because the crab is in it. The talking crab is one of the villains. And the idea was that when he tells his backstory, the crab, this really, really good but sort of surrealistic animator was going to animate that sequence. So it was like seen through the eyes of this crab. And that part, they got a lot of it done. It's the whole part, if you remember in the comic, where he goes to the Shaolin Temple, and he goes in because he wants to train to beat the cowboy for eating his family. And a lot of that got done. But there's so much of it is just, there's a little bit of it that has a fight in it. And I actually put in one sequence, the main reason for the whole story happening is my cat's looking at me over the top of my screen.
His whiskers in the immediate foreground.
The head is like right on the top of it. At one, because I put Marv and Nancy in it. There's a scene in this diner, but I drew Marv. It's like, you know, he was going to be all in black and white and gray.
Oh, that's cool.
And Nancy in the thing, and Marv looks like he's been, you know, like he's, I don't know, like he's gotten AIDS. He's like, he has not aged well, and because he's all this rough life and all the, I mean, like he'd never gotten electrocuted. He just worn out from all the killing and beatings he took. And she pickpockets the wallet of the Shaolin cowboy. So when he goes to pay his bill, he's got no money, and that he has to pay back. The waitress pays for his, and he has to pay that back. But it goes into this whole thing. There were zombies in it. There was like this giant monster that had all these little creatures living on its back, like remoras, and they all, at the time, because it was in 2008, they all looked like George Bush. And they were like, they loot this town, and it was just totally crazy. And there was like, the main villain was, because I was been watching The Sopranos, and I thought, well, there's this other gang family that I call the Caesarians, and there's this giant body who kind of looked like, the body looked like, you ever seen Tora-san?
Mm.
Well, anyway, this Japanese character, this Yakuza, except that in the course of the thing, we found out the cowboy wiped out this whole family, but they saved the heads and they transplanted them onto this giant body. So it's like these 4 heads along with their mother all living on one body.
That's amazing.
The mother was always complaining, and like there was things like they were talking about, you know, the difficulties of having sex. They'd have to put a towel over their mom's head because all this crazy shit we were going to have. And then one of the main guys, the crab's in there, and blabbering on. But so yeah, it never, you know, so it just kind of, you know, that's it. But it would have been, I don't know. It was such.
I feel a little bit bad that I asked because that
You want that,
sounds so
right?
good.
Yeah.
It sounds great.
And Jeff,
it's the only real script I've kind of. I mean, the whole thing was, and Lily and Lana came over and they were a big help. But that was kind of the beginning of the end of Burly Man, because it did create some tension because the producers, the American producers, well, the guys that run it were Circle of Confusion, who Robert Kirkman had such good luck with. But
yeah, I remember when those guys were sniffing around, man. I think they did Scott Pilgrim. Were they a part of that?
It's possible. They were pretty close with Image for a while.
Yeah.
They might still be.
They bought everything. They would just option everything, and then because they just happened to option The Walking Dead, and it was Frank Darabont that really kind of got that thing going. But it did not end well with them. But I mean, and the Japanese, because the Americans had a tendency with a lot of these films to kind of like, well, the Japanese have got so much invested in it, they'll just have to finish it or they're going to lose a bunch of money. And it happened so many times to Madhouse that they said, that's it, not this time, fuck you. And it fell apart. And I don't blame them. And I felt bad because I wanted to tell them, you guys ought to stop putting money in this thing because it's not gonna, they don't got the money to finish it. But, I couldn't because I was on,
Man.
Yeah, but I stayed in good terms with them. But I met a lot of guys. I met a lot of artists there, and
yeah, Madhouse is dope. Like they do like Ninja Scroll is near and dear to my heart, man.
And that was. But the guy that did that was the guy, and I'm still friends with him, Mariyama, who they kind of booted him out because he's interested in doing animation, and they wasn't making a lot of money, that company, and so they kind of forced him out, and he started another company called Mappa, who does a lot of stuff on Netflix. And they do good stuff. And he's kind of left that company and started another one. And it's correct because he uses the same typeface for his logos. Well, the Madhouse logo is the same as the Mappa. And he had like Satoshi Kon, if you're familiar with him. He did Tokyo Godfathers and Paprika. And he was doing his last film. I met him. It was almost like the year before he died, because he died really, really suddenly. And he was working on a kid's film. It was kind of like about robots, kind of an Astro Boy kind of a thing. And he got this, I think it was pancreatic cancer. And he was storyboarding it, hoping he could finish it. And then he was just talking into a cassette player or whatever it was. He was recording what he wanted it to be. But and Mariyama has never been able to get anybody, because it's kind of hard to finish this guy's movie. Because how do you follow that?
Yeah, that guy is filled with vision for sure, and it's very singular.
And could draw, man. His comics are fantastic.
Yeah, for sure. Jeff, we could do this all day, man.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No apologies, man. Fantastic. Some good food for thought. And I want to pick it up again whenever the Shaolin Cowboy miniseries is close to coming out, so that we could try to help goose the numbers for comic shops to order it and everything.
They're soliciting it at the end of September, I think, because I turned in the cover and the solicitation material. We got some,
yeah. Then get your shops to order this thing, man, and we'll do a reminder whenever final order cutoff is close.
It's been always a pleasure. Like I said, it's great, you guys. I'm surprised you want to talk to me, but it's great. It's a lot of fun. I like guys that like to do comics, because I don't know. It's like so many guys I'm gonna be like, they want to get into movies, and it's like, man, we work on a movie like one bolt in a giant machine.
Yeah, listen, man, this comics medium is everything to me, man. It's beyond just art. It's like, it's a culture. I mean, Jimmy and I like spend 6 days a week drawing comics, and one other day talking about them for a whole fucking day.
So you do it every Thursday. It's every Thursday you do this.
Yep. And in order to even do that, got to read comics in between all our drawing and stuff, man. So it's all consuming, and I would have it no other way.
One really quick question is not because can you make money doing this? Is it like, if you get so many viewers, can you like get advertising, or does it matter to you? I don't know.
It's trash, but what you get is very successful Kickstarter on Jimmy's part, and the most popular.
I just wondered if, like, because like some of those YouTubers that make it, I was hoping you guys got some kind of a thing of it, because you do a great service to everybody. I think
it has its benefits.
I was trying to real quick. I wrote an email to Frank's Millers because I was telling him, you know, you really should let these guys do a great job. And but she's kind of like, well, send me the links. I go, you don't need links, just go on YouTube and write in Kayfabe. And
She's probably watching wrestling videos right now going, I
Yeah.
don't understand. What is
Yeah.
Jeff talking about?
Yeah, hey Frank, man, let's have the shoot interview. Quit playing, quit hiding behind a damn assistant or whatever. Don't hide behind your producer, goddamn it, Frankie.
there you go. That's okay.
We have some conversations to have, man. We've been looking at your work a lot. Good food for thought,
know.
man. Apple 5, that's the one we want to talk about. We ain't going to ask you the same old bullshit about grim and gritty.
Yeah.
Those words aren't even going to come out of our mouths.
Okay.
You think you heard that, Jeff? Anyhow, man. Jeff, thanks so much.
It's been a pleasure.